Hello everyone, Omni-sensei here with What If I Were Reborn in MHA as DABI? Part 2. If you enjoy this content, smash the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description.
The corridor exploded into chaos. Overhaul's quirk activated as the concrete floor beneath them rippled like water before erupting into a forest of spikes. Dozens of them, each one sharp enough to impale and position to eliminate escape routes. Rumi launched herself backward with her powerful legs, the spikes passing beneath her by centimeters. She ricocheted off the wall, using the momentum to attack from a different angle. Her kick came in fast and hard, aimed directly at Overhaul's head. He didn't even flinch, just touched the ground. The wall crumbled from the force. Rumi's leg strength was no joke, but it had served its purpose. Overhaul was already moving, his hand touching the debris. The broken concrete reformed into projectiles that shot toward Rumi like bullets. She twisted midair, dodging most of them. One clipped her shoulder, drawing blood, but she didn't slow down. Just landed, assessed, and immediately launched another attack. But she couldn't get close. Every time she tried, Overhaul would reshape the terrain, create barriers, form spikes, and manipulate the environment with such speed and precision that closing the distance becomes nearly impossible. "Your quirk usage is quite remarkable," Overhaul said, his tone clinical and detached. "A body engineered for speed and impact. Legs built to shatter distance, reflexes sharp enough to live inside the moment. But all that strength demands proximity." Faint pause. "And I have no intention of letting you get that close." He touched the wall. The entire corridor began to shift, the floor tilting at an angle that sent Rumi sliding backward. She dug her feet in, claws extending from her boots, a support item designed specifically for situations like this, and held her ground. "You talk too much," Rumi growled. Then she grinned, blood on her teeth. "And you are wrong about something." "Am I? I don't need to get close to kick your crappy face." She kicked the wall beside her. The impact sent cracks spiderwebbing through the concrete. The structural damage destabilized Overhaul's constructs, causing several of his spikes to crumble. "Ingenious," he said almost thoughtfully. Then his gaze hardened. "Unfortunately for you, ingenuity alone doesn't win fights." He touched the ground again. This time, instead of attacking, he sank into it. The concrete opened up beneath him like liquid, allowing him to move through the floor itself. Rumi's ears twitched, tracking the subtle vibrations through the ground. She jumped just as spikes erupted from where she had been standing. But Overhaul was already attacking from another angle. A pillar of stone shot up, clipping her leg and sending her spinning. She recovered midair, landing in a crouch. Blood dripped from a cut on her thigh. "You really do live up to that rank 5 title," Overhaul admitted, emerging from the floor 10 meters away. "But this is my domain. Every surface here is an extension of my will. You cannot win a war of attrition against someone who controls the battlefield itself." Rumi's response was to laugh wild and fierce. "Yeah? Then I guess I will just smash the whole place apart until there's nothing left for you to hide behind." She launched herself forward again, but this time she wasn't aiming for Overhaul. She was targeting the walls, the floor, and the ceiling, destroying the environment itself with devastating kicks that sent rubble flying. Overhaul was forced to dodge his own collapsing debris as he continuously reconstructed the battlefield, reshaping it faster each time Rumi shattered it. But he wasn't just defending anymore, he was studying her, tracking her rhythm, anticipating her angles. A spike erupted at the precise moment she pivoted, carving into her arm. Another followed immediately, grazing her side before she could fully recover her footing. Rumi was bleeding from multiple wounds now, her hero costume torn, but her grin never faded. This was the kind of fight she lived for, a real challenge, a genuine threat, an opponent who required everything she had. But Overhaul was getting frustrated. His attacks were becoming less precise and more aggressive. "You've reduced years of work to rubble," he said, and for the first time there was actual emotion in his voice. Anger, carefully built networks, resources gathered piece by piece, and plans that took years to put in motion. Undone because two heroes couldn't keep their noses out of business that had nothing to do with them. He slammed both hands on the ground. The entire corridor began to collapse. Walls, ceiling, floor, everything breaking down and reforming into a massive construct. Overhaul was merging with his environment, incorporating the structure itself into his body. His form grew, arms multiplied, and his lower body merged with the ground, giving him massive reach and stability. "This is what quirks do." His voice echoed now from somewhere deep within the grotesque construct, resonant and distorted. "They give human beings the illusion of being something more than what they are. Heroes and villains alike, all of you infected. All of you, convinced your power grants you the right to impose your will on the world." He paused. "Shin Namoto, Rikia Katsukame, forgive me." Dabi's eyes widened slightly. He had been holding Eri, keeping her protected behind a wall of blue flames while Rumi fought. But this was different from what he had expected. In the original timeline, Overhaul had fused with his subordinates after being pushed to his limits by Midoriya. But here, with two pro-heroes attacking his base, he was escalating faster. Desperately, the ground beneath them shook as Overhaul's massive form pulled itself together, a grotesque fusion of human, concrete, and the quirk-enhanced bodies of his subordinates. Rumi looked up at the monstrosity. "Well, that's new. Need backup," Dabi called out. "Hell no. This is exactly what I wanted." Rumi's grin was feral. "But yeah, okay. Maybe a little help wouldn't hurt." Dabi carefully set Eri down in a protected alcove he had created with flames, a barrier that would keep her safe from debris and attacks. "Stay here. Don't move until we are done." Eri nodded, eyes wide but trusting. Dabi stepped forward, blue flames intensifying around his hands. "All right then, let's finish this." Overhaul's massive fused form surged forward, attacking with multiple limbs at once as spikes burst from the floor, walls, and ceiling, while stone fists the size of cars slammed down in relentless succession. Rumi dodged and weaved, her enhanced reflexes pushed to their limit. Each kick she delivered now had to target structural weak points, joints, connections, anywhere the fusion looked unstable. Dabi provided ranged support. Blue flames hot enough to melt stone carved through Overhaul's attacks, creating openings for Rumi to exploit. He used his breathing technique to maintain maximum heat output without burning himself out. Total concentration breathing. Hold. The flames responded to his controlled breathing, burning hotter and more precisely than they ever had before. "Your quirk," Overhaul's voice echoed from somewhere within the shifting mass. "That isn't ordinary fire. What exactly are you?" "No comments," Dabi replied, sending a wave of blue fire that forced Overhaul to reconstruct his defenses. The battle found a vicious cadence, Rumi driving in from one flank to force Overhaul's defense, Dabi striking from another with concentrated bursts of flame the instant an opening appeared. They exchanged no words. Coordination came instinctively, forged through long hours of shared combat drills. A shift of weight, a change in tempo, was enough. Yet Overhaul was evolving in real time. The quirks he had fused into himself began to integrate more seamlessly, regeneration accelerating as torn flesh reassembled almost the moment it was damaged. His offense grew less structured, more chaotic, with attacks branching unpredictably and eroding the rhythm they had established. A massive stone fist swung down and caught Rumi cleanly, launching her through the corridor wall in a violent crash of shattered concrete. "Bunny!" Dabi's flames surged brighter. Blue fire roared forward and tore straight through Overhaul's torso, burning a molten cavity through the grotesque construct. The hole sealed instantly. Overhaul laughed. "You still don't understand." His voice echoed through the mass. "I can rebuild anything. Destruction means nothing to me." The wall behind him exploded. Rumi burst back into the corridor, blood running down the side of her face, but her grin wide and feral. "You know what your problem is?" she said, and she was grinning again. "You never shut up." DABI's flames stayed constant, hot, relentless. He wasn't trying to destroy the construct anymore, forcing Overhaul to rebuild. "He's not infinite," DABI muttered, watching the seams form and close again. Every rebuild costs him. The reconstructions were slower now, but barely noticeable. Rumi caught it too, and her approach changed immediately. Instead of striking at weak points, she attacked everywhere. Fast, chaotic bursts of motion that forced Overhaul to defend in multiple directions at once. "Deconstruct this." She feinted left, drove right, and shattered a stone limb at the joint. By the time it reformed, she was already forcing another defense. Overhaul's breathing began to echo from within the construct. "Stop moving." His voice sharpened. "Stop moving." "Nope," Rumi said. DABI widened the flames. The blue fire formed a perimeter around the battlefield. Not striking, just burning, forcing Overhaul to pull his mass inward and defend from the heat. Stone didn't melt easily, but it did expand under heat, and expansion meant fractures, which began spreading across the construct not because of a single decisive blow, but through mounting pressure, steady accumulation, and two opponents who simply refused to stop. Overhaul snarled, "You pests!" He swung a massive arm, but it crumbled halfway through the motion before the strike could land. He rebuilt it instantly, slower this time, and Rumi seized the opening, launching upward and landing atop the construct before driving both legs down with explosive force. The impact detonated through the entire structure and forced a scream from Overhaul, not because the stone shattered, but because the shockwave traveled straight through the construct into the human body at its center, the part he couldn't reinforce, the part still made of flesh, leaving the entire mass shuddering under the strain. Without the focus to maintain it, the structure began shedding mass. Stone collapsed away in huge chunks as the absorbed bodies separated and fell free. The entire construct collapsed inward, breaking apart in heavy slabs of stone and debris, and when the dust finally settled, Kai Chisaki was left kneeling at the center of the wreckage. His arms trembling violently and his breathing ragged as he slowly looked up at them, disbelief burning in his eyes. "How?" Rumi wiped blood from her cheek and grinned. "How? Because you are a weak-ass bastard." DABI stepped forward, blue flames curling steadily at his side, regarding Chisaki with cold, flat eyes. "Looks like you ran out of gas." Overhaul stared at them, breathing hard. For the first time since the fight began, he had nothing left to rebuild. Overhaul let out a low, bitter laugh. "You have no idea what you've interfered with. The quirk-destroying drug was meant to restore order, to return society to something stable. Heroes and your precious quirks are the reason everything is broken." "Save it for the police," DABI interrupted. He pulled out reinforced quirk-suppressing cuffs, designed for dangerous villains, and locked them onto Overhaul's broken arms. He screamed in pain, but the cuffs held. Rumi already had her phone pressed to her ear.
Backup est en route, police, paramédic, everyone.
They will lock this place down and collect every piece of evidence. DABI went back to Eri, carefully lifting her again. She buried her face in his shoulder, her small body trembling. "It's over," he told her gently. "You are safe now." Meanwhile, the UA entrance exam. Midoriya was having his own struggles. He stood in the center of Battle Center B, his chest heaving in a rhythmic, low-frequency hiss. His focus now is on the practical exam, which was again a brutal hit of reality to him. He could move faster than the one-pointers and outmaneuver the three-pointers, but without any quirk, he lacked the raw power to destroy them. He had spent the last 10 minutes acting as a tactical coy, pulling trapped examinees out of harm's way and kicking debris into robot joints to disable them for others. But his body simply wasn't enhanced enough to destroy the robots. In the end, his own score remained at 0. Then the ground shook. The zero-pointer emerged, a mountain of treads and rusted steel. It wasn't a challenge. It was a disaster. As the massive shadow fell over the street, leaving no choice but to retreat for examinees, Midoriya turned to run, his mind already calculating the fastest exit route. He heard the cry. A girl, the same one who had bumped into him before the exam, who had used her quirk to stop him from tripping, was trapped under debris in the zero-pointer's path. Everyone else was running away. DABI's words echoed in his mind. The first time you face real danger, your body's going to lock up. Your instincts will tell you to run. That's when the breathing matters. It keeps your head clear and your body moving, even when fear tries to shut you down. Midoriya's hands clenched into fists. Keep your mind clear. He started running toward the zero-pointer. Take a deep breath. He sucked in a volume of air that made his chest plate creak. His blood pressure skyrocketed, his veins bulging with oxygen-saturated crimson. He wasn't just running, he moved like a piston in motion. Don't be nervous. Don't be afraid. Control your breathing. He leaped. The jump wasn't just a physical act. Mid-air, he reached for the one for all's power once again, channeling it into his arm with the same output. As he pulled the energy into his right arm, he forced his breathing to its absolute limit. He was using the internal pressure of his lungs to create a buffer around his bones. Smaz! The punch connected, and the collision was a tectonic event. The zero-pointer's reinforced plating didn't just dent. It underwent structural liquefaction. The shockwave of the punch, amplified by the high-pressure oxygen in Midoriya's muscles, sent a ripple through the air that shattered every remaining window in the mock city. The Titan toppled, and Midoriya was falling. The damage to him was also no less severe but not catastrophic as it would have been 10 months ago. His legs were fractured, shattered by the sheer mechanical stress of the leap, and his right arm hung at a sickening angle, skin turning into deep purple. The pain was incredible, but his breathing never stopped or wavered. Land. I need to land. Keep the rhythm. Don't let the lungs collapse. Something grabbed him. The girl he had saved had activated her quirk zero gravity, making him weightless before he could hit the ground. They floated gently down together as the zero-pointer crashed behind them, creating a cloud of dust and debris. Midoriya's consciousness was fading. The pain from his broken limbs was overwhelming, but his last thought before passing out was satisfaction. He had saved someone, like a real hero would. UA High School Monitor Room. All Might stood before the monitors displaying Midoriya's rescue, firmly in his muscle form, hands clasped behind his back and a proud smile set across his face. Young Midoriya, he murmured softly, you truly possess the heart of a hero. The other teachers were talking excitedly about the display of power, about the destruction of a zero-pointer and whether to count it as points or not. But All Might's attention was divided, because on another monitor, one showing news feeds from around the city, a breaking story was developing. Massive villain arrest at what appears to be a Yakuza compound. Pro-hero Mirko, currently ranked number 5, led the operation alongside an unnamed underground hero. Sources confirmed they've recovered evidence of illegal quirk experimentation and rescued a young girl who was being held captive. The news footage showed Rumi emerging from the compound, battered but victorious, and beside her, a figure in a dark hero costume carrying a small white-haired girl. The camera zoomed in. The underground hero's face was partially obscured by his mask, but his eyes were visible. All Might recognized those eyes immediately. Young DABI, he murmured. So while Midoriya had been taking his first steps toward becoming a hero at the entrance exam, DABI had been taking down an entire villain organization and saving a child. All Might smiled again. The next generation was rising. Midoriya with his selfless heroism and DABI with his tactical precision and unwavering determination. Perhaps the future wouldn't be as dark as he had feared. Perhaps there was hope after all. On the monitor, Midoriya was being loaded into an ambulance. Recovery girl already rushing to treat his injuries. On the news feed, DABI was handing Eri over to paramedics while Rumi gave a statement to the police. Two different scenes. Two different approaches to heroism. But the same result. People saved, villains stopped, hope preserved. All Might leaned back in his chair, exhaustion and pride warring in his expression. The future is in good hands, he said quietly to the empty room. Then he stood, preparing to go check on Midoriya personally. The symbol of peace's time was ending, but the next generation was ready to carry the torch forward. And that was enough. DABI's flat. Come on, Eri. One more bite. DABI in his casual clothes sat at his kitchen table, chopsticks in hand, trying to feed a very stubborn 5-year-old. Not hungry. However, the small white-haired and horned girl shook her head. She was wearing an oversized shirt, one of Rumi's, that hung on her like a dress. You need to eat, DABI insisted, holding out another spoonful of rice. You are still recovering. It had been 3 days since the raid on the Shai Hasaikai compound. After the news broke, Hiro Mirko arrests a major Yakuza organization and rescues an abused child. The situation had become complicated fast. Investigations, inquiries, mountains of paperwork, and questions about jurisdiction and proper procedure, and why 2 heroes had raided a private compound without a warrant. But the evidence they found had been damning. The quirk-erasing drug and the medical records showing repeated use of Eri's quirk, and the testimony from rescued subordinates. In the end, the authorities had little choice but to commend the operation. And then came the question of what to do with Eri. The 4-year-old child had no one left. Her mother had abandoned her years ago, convinced Eri was cursed after her quirk caused her father to disappear. The only person who had taken her in afterward was her grandfather, the head of the Yakuza. He was dead now. Legally and practically, she had no relatives, guardian, or place waiting for her. Even after the rescue, even with the laboratory gone, the world outside did not automatically become a home. It was simply a different kind of waiting room, and technically she should have gone into the foster system. But after what she had been through, the idea of placing her with strangers who didn't understand her trauma seemed cruel. So after a lot of back and forth, and some string pulling from both Rumi's agency and Gran Torino's contacts, temporary custody had been granted to the 2 heroes who had rescued her. Obviously, the decision wasn't born of sentiment. The HPSC had initially pushed for a high-security containment facility, viewing Eri's rewind quirk as a Class S biohazard. Whenever a white-coated government doctor approached, the air around her distorted, threatening to rewind the cellular age of anyone within a 3-meter radius. If not for DABI's insistence that Aizawa, the Erasure hero, remain on standby, the situation could have spiraled into catastrophe. After several tense attempts and careful observation, one fact became clear. Only 2 people did not trigger her quirk's overdrive. DABI and Rumi. That was how temporary custody of Eri ended up in their hands, making them, overnight, the world's least prepared guardians to a traumatized 5-year-old with a volatile quirk. Within the hero community, they weren't a high-profile couple. DABI's existence had always been deliberately low-key, and Rumi had never cared much for publicity beyond her work. They had moved in together about a year earlier. What began as a partnership built on training had shifted gradually into something deeper. DABI had eventually admitted what he felt, and Rumi, in her characteristically blunt way, had told him she felt the same. Dating had been uncomplicated, living together had been natural. They balanced each other well, strengths offsetting weaknesses without friction. But raising a child? That was uncharted territory for both of them. Just 3 more bites, DABI negotiated. Then you can be done. Eri eyed the bowl of oats with open suspicion. After a moment, with the careful deliberation of a child testing the limits of her leverage, she reached across the table and grabbed one of Rumi's rabbit ears. Rumi froze mid-sip. At the far end of the table, coffee halfway to her lips and case files spread out in front of her, she went completely still. Anyone else who touched her ears without permission would have lost teeth. She had put people in the hospital for less. But this was Eri. A small, fragile child who was only just beginning to understand what safe contact felt like. So Rumi stayed perfectly still. Eri's fingers were gentle, exploratory. She traced along the edge of the ear, feeling the softness of the fur, watching with quiet fascination as it twitched slightly under her touch.
Soft, Eri murmured.
Rumi's ear twitched again despite her best effort to control it. DABI noticed the microscopic tension in her shoulders and had to fight the urge to smirk. "Careful," he said lightly, resting his chin against his hand. "Those are classified hero equipment." Rumi shot him a flat look without turning her head. "Keep talking and you're eating oats too." Eri blinked between them, fingers still buried in soft fur. Rumi slowly lowered her coffee cup to the table. "They're sensitive," she admitted, voice unusually restrained. "So don't yank. Gentle is fine." Eri nodded seriously, adjusting her grip with exaggerated care. DABI slid the bowl a little closer to her. "Here, take a bite," he negotiated smoothly. "You've already unlocked ear privileges. That's premium access." Rumi's other ear flicked in protest. Eri looked at the oats, then at the ear in her hand, then obediently took a bite. DABI hid his grin behind his sleeve. Rumi muttered under her breath, "I can't believe I am being used as collateral." That's when the doorbell rang. DABI sighed. "Who now?" He stood up, making sure Eri was secure in her chair, and went to answer the door. Standing on his doorstep, looking nervous and slightly worse for wear, was Izuku Midoriya. Rumi didn't look up from the table. "If it's a reporter, tell them I don't exist." DABI called back over his shoulder. "It's the green-haired kid." "Okay," Rumi replied, continuing to feed Eri now that DABI had abandoned his post. DABI stepped aside. "Gomein, what's up?" Midoriya entered hesitantly, his eyes immediately landing on Eri. Recognition flickered across his face. He had seen the news about the Yakuza raid and the rescued girl. He connected the dots that the unnamed underground hero was probably DABI, but he was smart enough not to say it out loud. The media coverage had been carefully controlled. Details about the cork erasing drug had been suppressed. The Hero Public Safety Commission deemed it too dangerous for public knowledge. As far as most people knew, it was just a cork enhancement drug operation that got busted. Midoriya's arms were in casts. He moved stiffly, clearly still recovering from yesterday's exam. "So you messed up the exam?" DABI asked, getting straight to the point. In the background, both Rumi and Eri turned to stare at the newcomer, watching without blinking. Midoriya's face went pale. How did you?" "Frankly, it's not hard to figure out. You are here after 3 days, and you have got that expression people get when they think they have failed." Midoriya fidgeted with his casts. Then, in a rush, he explained everything. The exam, the robots, his complete inability to score points, using one for all only once to save a girl from the zero-pointer and destroying his body in the process. So in the end, except for the zero-pointer which doesn't have any points, I couldn't do anything. Midoriya finished miserably. "I failed. After all that training, all that preparation, I still... Is he really the successor to All Might?" Rumi asked bluntly, not bothering to sugarcoat it. She knew about Midoriya being trained as All Might's successor. DABI had told her that much, but not the specifics about One for All. Just that All Might was grooming the kid to take over someday. Midoriya went completely white. His already low self-esteem, battered by the exam, dropped even further. His eyes started to water. That's when Eri spoke up. Mama wrong. He had been watching this exchange carefully. And now, with the blunt honesty only children possess, she dodged the spoon Rumi was trying to feed her and stood up on the table. Rumi blinked. Dabi's head snapped around. Midoriya's crying paused mid-sniffle. What? Her bunny ears stretched. Mama wrong. Rumi blinked. Dabi's head snapped around, and Midoriya's crying paused mid-sniffle. What? She asked instinctively, but her voice came out thinner than usual. Her bunny ears rose slowly, stretching upright in sharp attention. Eri looked directly at Midoriya with her large red eyes. Oni-chan saved Wani-chan. Oni-chan is a hero. She was talking about Uraraka, the girl from the exam whom Midoriya had destroyed himself to save. For a moment, complete silence filled the apartment. Then Midoriya began to cry again. But this time the tears were different. They weren't born from shame or frustration, but from something overwhelming and unfamiliar. For the first time in his 15 years of life, someone had called him a hero and meant it, not as encouragement or as a distant dream, but as a simple statement of truth. Oni-chan is a hero. The words hit harder than any punch he had ever taken. Meanwhile, Rumi abruptly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor as her face turned red, not from anger, but from something else entirely. I need to, she stammered. You need to go to the bathroom? Dabi supplied helpfully, recognizing the signs. Yeah, right. Yeah. Rumi practically fled toward the bathroom, calling over her shoulder. Take care of Eri for a second. Dabi lifted Eri off the table and settled her on his hip, where she looked up at him with a worried expression. Did I do something wrong? No, Dabi assured her quietly. You did great. In the bathroom, Rumi stared at her reflection in the mirror, her face completely flushed while her ears stood straight up, twitching with emotion. It was the same helpless expression she had worn when Dabi confessed his feelings to her a year ago, that overwhelming warmth in her chest and the same inability to process emotions she wasn't used to feeling. Is it supposed to feel this good? She whispered to herself. Being called Mama by a rescued child, watching that same child comfort someone else with simple kindness, realizing they might actually be doing something right. It made sense to her. Before meeting Dabi, she had been nothing more than a battle maniac. Now everything felt different. She splashed cold water on her face, trying to get herself under control. Back in the kitchen, Midoriya was still crying. But he was also smiling now, that contradiction of emotions that came when someone's heart was too full to contain itself. Dabi let him have the moment. Then, when the tears finally slowed, he asked, So you are not here just to tell me how sad you feel, right? Midoriya wiped his eyes with his casted arm. I want to train harder than before. I need to master one for all properly, learning how to control it so I am not destroying my body every time I use it. Thought, if I came here and asked you, maybe you could help me figure out how to do that. No. The word was flat and final. Midoriya's expression crumbled. But listen to me. Dabi set Eri down on the couch with some coloring books they had bought yesterday, and then turned his full attention to Midoriya. You want more training. I get that. But what you need right now isn't more combat techniques or quirk control exercises. Then what? Dabi leaned against the kitchen counter, his turquoise eyes tracking the faint tremors in Midoriya's casted hands. He wasn't looking at the boy's spirit. He was looking at his biological load. You want more training because you think the vessel isn't strong enough, Dabi said, his voice dropping into a low, clinical tone. You think hauling more scrap or running more breathing drills will somehow make the spark stop shattering your humerus. But that's not your real problem, Izuku. Midoriya blinked, confused. But It's true my body can't handle the full power of one for all. DABI cut him off calmly. That's the point, kid. Who told you to use the full power of one for all? Your problem is your cognitive mapping. DABI stepped forward, tapping his own temple. You've spent 10 months learning how to breathe and how to build a frame, DABI said. But you still treat one for all like a superpower you flip on and off like a light switch. There's nothing wrong with that approach. That's how it worked for All Might. But let's be honest, that guy is just built differently. In your case, thinking of it like a light bulb isn't helping. It's better to imagine it as a fan, where you can increase the speed step by step 5 levels, for example. Of course, the number of levels is entirely up to you. DABI crossed his arms, dissecting the physics of the smash Midoriya had described. What you need right now isn't more training. You need to stop thinking of the quirk as a tool and start thinking of it as a part of you. Just like your breathing. Midoriya's eyes widened as he grabbed his notebook, the familiar muttering already spilling out before he could stop it. A fan, not a switch, right. So instead of one massive output, it's regulated flow levels, maybe 5 to start? Or, no, that might be too rigid. Maybe percentage-based scaling would work better? His pencil scratched rapidly across the page. And if I stabilize it with total concentration breathing, then the energy circulation through the body should stay consistent, which means less strain on the limbs. He flipped the page, still mumbling under his breath. Distribute the power evenly, maintain baseline output. Increase gradually depending on movement. Yeah, that could actually work. DABI watched the kid for a moment, slightly dumbfounded. The intensity of Midoriya's muttering was honestly a bit creepy. Still, he didn't interrupt. A few seconds later, Midoriya finally snapped out of it, blinking as he realized what he'd been doing. Sorry, he said quickly, already bowing his head in embarrassment. DABI waved it off and continued. If you only use it in bursts, the sudden vascular pressure and kinetic output will always snap your bones, he said calmly. But if you learn to spread that energy across your entire body, your skin, muscles, and whole musculoskeletal system, in a steady loop, your body will start adapting. He looked directly at Midoriya. You won't be a boy using a quirk. You will have a quirked body. DABI glanced at Eri, who was carefully coloring a hero with blue flames, then back at the battered boy. Rumi emerged from the bathroom, her face mostly back to normal, though her ears were still twitching. Is he giving you the breathing is everything speech? Yes, ma'am. Mirko-san. Midoriya floundered. Just call me Rumi. We are not that formal here. She plopped back down at the table. Midoriya absorbed all this. Go home, Izuku. Get some rest. But while you are lying in bed, I want you to try something. Don't smash anything. Just try to feel the spark moving through your pinky finger. Then your hand, arm, and legs. Keep it at a level where it doesn't even sting, just a hum. That hum should become your new heartbeat. He paused, then added quietly. And Eri's right, you are a hero. So don't make her watch her Oni-chan collapse because he was too impatient to learn how to walk before trying to fly. Midoriya stood there, the weight of the realization sinking in. I understand, DABI-san, Midoriya said, bowing low. I will make the hum my heartbeat. I promise. As Midoriya prepared to leave, Eri called out from the couch, Bye-bye, Oni-chan. Midoriya's face lit up again. He waved enthusiastically despite his casts.
Eritian.
After he left, DABI closed the door and turned to find both Rumi and Eri staring at him. What? I wasn't aware you were this good with kids. Rumi observed. Actually, I am not. You just gave him exactly what he needed to hear. Tough love, clear direction, and encouragement. That's good teaching. You think so? I was just avoiding extra work. Mama right, Eri added from the couch. Papa good teacher. Both adults froze. Papa. She had called him Papa. DABI glanced at Rumi, and she met his eyes a second later, the realization settling between them at the same time as a faint flush crept across both their faces. "We are not ready for this," DABI said. "Absolutely not," Rumi agreed. "We have no idea what we are doing. None whatsoever. We are going to screw this up so badly. Probably." They looked at Eri, who was watching them with large, trusting eyes, a child who had only known pain and fear for most of her life, who was learning what safety felt like, who was calling them Mama and Papa despite having only been with them for a day. "But we are going to try anyway," DABI finished quietly. "Yeah," Rumi agreed. "Yeah, we are." Eri smiled, a small, genuine smile that made all the uncertainty worth it. Midoriya household. It had been 3 weeks since the UA entrance exam was conducted, and the exam results arrived in the mail. Izuku Midoriya had been sitting at his kitchen table, staring at the envelope for 10 minutes, unable to open it. His mother hovered near the doorframe, equally nervous. Finally, with shaking hands, he tore it open. A holographic projection activated. All Might's face appeared, his heroic muscular form, grinning widely. "Young Midoriya, I am here." As a projection, Izuku's heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. "I have excellent news. You scored 70 points in the practical exam. While you only destroyed one villain, the zero-pointer, which was worth 0 combat points, you earned a massive 60 rescue points for saving your fellow examinee from certain death. Additionally, you received 10 assist points for helping other students throughout the exam." The projection showed footage from the exam. Midoriya clearing debris so others could escape, distracting robots so other examinees could score, and finally, the spectacular destruction of the zero-pointer. A true hero doesn't just defeat villains. They save people, help them. Your selfless actions embodied the spirit of heroism. Welcome, young Midoriya, to your hero academia. The projection ended. Izuku burst into tears. His mother wrapped him in a hug, crying too. He had done it. He had actually done it. He was going to the UA. 3 weeks later, 3 a.m. Beep, beep. DABI woke to the sound of an alarm and small screamings. It was Eri. 3 weeks later, 3 a.m. Beep, beep. DABI woke to the sound of an alert alarm and small screams. It was Eri. His heightened senses instantly detected the shift in the air's molecular vibration that can only be caused by wild quirk activation. He was out of bed, and beside him, Rumi was already a blur of motion, her ears pinned back as she sensed the high frequency of a quirk reaching critical mass. The duo's pro instincts were at their peak as they moved without talking. And before DABI even cleared the bedroom door, his thumb slammed into a specialized HPSC encrypted emergency transponder mounted on the wall. The signal was instantaneous. 2 floors up, in an apartment strategically placed by the Commission to keep their assets clustered, Aizawa Shuda's own alarm triggered a high-intensity strobe light. When DABI and Rumi reached Eri's door, the sight was a nightmare of biophysics. Eri was at the center of a temporal feedback loop. The air around her pulsed with a golden, iridescent hue. An apple sitting on her desk began to unripen. Right in front of them, it turned from deep red to a hard, bitter green, then shriveled and shrunk until it was nothing more than a cluster of white blossoms that fell, fresh and dew-covered, onto the desk. "Rumi, Vanguard Pattern B," DABI barked. Rumi didn't rush in. She knew the stakes. Eri's quirk targeted living matter, and Rumi was a powerhouse of biological energy. One touch of that golden light and she wouldn't just be injured, she would be erased. Using her explosive leg strength, Rumi delivered a precision kick to the heavy metal desk, sliding it across the doorway. Since the desk was inorganic steel, it remained unaffected by the golden pulse, creating a dead zone barricade. She stood on the threshold, a coiled spring of muscle, her eyes scanning for structural collapse. DABI stayed back, his hands raised. He had to be even more careful. Otherwise, his super soldier biology will be put at greatest risk. If he were rewound, the serum's delicate integration would go haywire, potentially causing a cellular explosion.
Eri,
"Look at me," DABI shouted, his voice steady, using a low frequency, sun-breathing hum to cut through her panic. "Focus on the sound. Match my rhythm." DABI addressed her, trying to make her remember how he taught her to control her emotions from the past few weeks. Alas, the girl was too trapped in a nightmare of past experiences. Bang! Right then, Aizawa Shoyuta, having used his capture scarf to swing down from his balcony, crashed through the window. He entered Eri's room with his goggles already down and his hair defying gravity. Erasure active. The red glow of Aizawa's quirk flooded the room. Immediately, the golden distortion vanished. The raw cotton on the floor remained cotton, and the sap on the floorboards dried. Eri collapsed into a heap of exhaustion, her breathing ragged but the danger neutralized. "Status?" Aizawa rasped, his eyes bloodshot and unblinking. "Stabilized," DABI replied, his pulse gradually easing from its combat-ready 160. There was no physical contact or casualties, and the transponder functioned as intended. By 6 o'clock, a secure line was established with the Hero Public Safety Commission, HPSC. If possible, DABI and Rumi didn't want to report the incident, but they can't be risking the safety of Eri or any civilians that might get caught. And HPSC, as they expected, weren't happy about the incident. They concluded that Eri was a Class S biorisk that could no longer be managed in a residential setting, even with pro-hero neighbors. Presently, the HPSC saw an opportunity to solve two problems with one directive. They had grown increasingly wary of DABI's unauthorized autonomy. His underground operations and team formations were becoming too unpredictable, and they even feared he was building a private, powerful team. They needed him on a leash, and they needed Eri in a vault. Finally, the conditions or ruling that the HPDC called to like are the following. Eri would be moved to a specialized, quirk-shielded dormitory within the UA High School campus under the constant proximity of Aizawa Shoyuta. DABI would be officially conscripted as an assistant professor for Class 1A. On paper, it was to teach physiological optimization and combat breath control. By placing DABI at UA, the HPSC could monitor his every move through the school's state-of-the-art security systems and the oversight of Principal Nizu. 1 week after the midnight crisis at the apartment, DABI stood before the towering glass monolith of UA High School. The sun glinted off the H-shaped structure, a fortress that felt more like a cage to most. But DABI knew better. The HPSC thought they had pinned him to a map, turning an unpredictable underground variable into a documented employee. They didn't realize that by placing him here, they had handed him the keys to the future. "Dumbass," he muttered, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. Still, he knew this arrangement wouldn't last forever. He had no intention of playing along with their little games for long. It was the first day for DABI at UA, and luckily it was also the opening day for the students too. DABI stood outside Class 1A, dressed in dark, high-durability tactical gear. Sleek, professional, and devoid of the flashy theatricality most heroes favored. Eri was with Recovery Girl in the infirmary, the safest place for her during school hours, with multiple heroes nearby if her quirk activated. Beside him, Aizawa looked even more tired than usual. His capture weapon was wrapped loosely around his neck, and he was holding what had to be his fourth coffee of the morning. "Why you?" Aizawa rasped, his eyes bloodshot. "Don't be so dramatic, Shoyuta." DABI smirked, his turquoise eyes sharp. "Besides, would you rather have Yamada screaming 'Good morning' in your ear right now?" Aizawa actually winced. The mere thought of present mix 8 o'clock volume level clearly causing him physical pain. Fine. But let's get one thing straight. I lead, you supplement. This is my class. If you try to turn them into like you on day 1, I will erase you next week. Yeah, our class. I hear you. Aizawa slid the door open with a sharp, heavy click. The chatter inside, the sound of 20 teenagers meeting their fate, died instantly. While Aizawa slouched in, looking like a disheveled ghost, DABI's entrance was a different frequency entirely. He didn't slouch and moved with the predatory, silent grace of a pro hero. The students felt the shift in atmospheric pressure before they even saw him. He was a presence that demanded a high level of attention. DABI scanned the room, cataloging faces. Midoriya near the window. There is surprise recognition in his face as he saw DABI. Bakugo sitting right in front of him with a foul expression. Ida, Uraraka, Azui, Yaoyorozu. All the faces he recognized from the anime, including a red and white-haired kid sitting at the end of the second row, without any expression. Shoto Todoroki, his younger brother and family. The memories of his childhood instantly surfaced, particularly the scar on Shoto's face and the time he attacked him. Nah, I am a new man now. DABI shook his head subconsciously while maintaining the same look. On the other hand, Aizawa stepped to the podium, still looking like he would rather be asleep. I am Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher. It's a pleasure, I am sure. He gestured lazily to DABI and paused. Name is DABI. DABI stepped forward, his voice a steady, resonant baritone that echoed off the reinforced walls. He scanned their confused, eager faces one last time. Aizawa took charge. Change into your gym uniforms and report to the PE grounds. We're starting with a quirk assessment test. A faint hiss of heat slipped from his palms, distorting the air. And if anyone thinks today is for orientation speeches, his gaze sharpened. You're already behind. A heavy silence dropped. Then, a quirk test? Kaminari blurted. On the first day? Uraraka whispered. Midoriya straightened immediately, nerves spiking. Assessment. Already. Bakugo's lips curled. TCH. Finally. Ida shot to his feet. Understood. We shall proceed at once. Training ground beta. The 8 physical tests proceeded exactly as DABI remembered from the original timeline. With one significant difference. Midoriya performed better. A little better, if he may add. His 50-meter dash was competitive, not the fastest, but nowhere near the slowest. His grip strength was above average for a quirkless baseline, and his standing long jump utilized a breathing technique to enhance muscle output. He wasn't exactly dominating, but not failing behind either. Throughout the tests, DABI watched carefully. Midoriya was using total concentration breathing constantly, maintaining the rhythm even during intense physical activity. It was almost perfect. DABI had to admit it. The kid was a genius. Midoriya adapted quickly and often figured things out on his own. As for full cowling, that still wasn't there yet, which made sense. Midoriya understood the concept, controlling his output instead of releasing everything at once, but he hadn't really had the chance to test that theory in practice. It wasn't something he could safely experiment with at home, where a mistake could easily end with him injuring himself again. Even All Might had advised him not to try anything reckless until school resumed. Still, even without that breakthrough, the breathing training alone had improved his performance in every test. Better oxygen delivery meant greater endurance. Better body control meant more efficient movement. And increased pain tolerance meant he could push through fatigue longer than before. By the final test, the ball throw, Midoriya was tied for second to last place with Minoru Mineta. According to DABI's calculations, whoever performed worse on this last test would be expelled. Midoriya stepped up to throw. DABI could see the conflict in his expression. Use one for all and risk breaking himself, or throw without it and definitely fail. Then Midoriya's face cleared and a decision was made. He didn't try to contain it. The wind-up was clean, and at the final instant power sparked. Not through his entire arm, but funneled, compressed, and forced into just 2 fingers. Ring and middle. For a split second, it worked. The ball tore from his hand like a bullet, slicing upward into the sky. Then, sharp crack. His fingers bent at a wrong angle as the recoil snapped through them, the controlled output collapsing under its own force. The ball rocketed into the sky. It wasn't as far as Bakugo's explosive throw or Uraraka's infinity throw, but was respectable. 705.3 meters. The crowd gasped. Aizawa's expression remained neutral, but DABI caught the slight widening of his eyes. Final rankings appeared on Aizawa's tablet. Minoru Mineta, last place. Mineta, Aizawa said flatly, you are expelled. The purple-haired student's face went white. EHH? He shrieked, stumbling forward. Wait. What? You can't just... I tried. I really tried. The rest of Class 1 stood frozen. Nobody laughed. They had all heard the rumors about Aizawa's expulsion of an entire class from Momo just now. Mineta dropped to his knees. Please, Eraserhead. I will do better. I swear. I will train harder. Stop slacking. Evil. Aizawa cut in. Doesn't matter. Mineta's shoulders trembled. But I wanted to be a hero, he muttered weakly. Aizawa's eyes were hard. You have no potential. Your quirk is mediocre with terrible physical conditioning, and your attitude is worse. UA doesn't accept students who coast on minimum effort. Security arrived to escort Mineta off the grounds. The other students watched in shocked silence. So he had been serious from the start. Aizawa actually expelled someone on day 1. DABI filed that information away and finally stepped in. Midoriya, Bakugo, Todoroki, front and center. His voice cut through the stunned silence. As the trio approached, DABI reached up and unlatched the high-tech, charcoal-gray partial mask. The students gasped, thanks to the super soldier integration. The once angry, weeping purple scars had faded into a series of sleek, silver-toned lines that traced his jaw and the underside of his eyes. They looked less like burns and more like tribal etchings, evidence of a body that had been dismantled and rebuilt with superior materials. He looked strikingly handsome in a rugged, dangerous way. His pale skin was healthy, and his turquoise eyes burned with an inner light. Wait! Momo Yaoyorozu whispered, her eyes widening. The silver scars? The tactical blue gear? Is that Blue Sun, the underground specialist? Ida asked, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. The one who recently dismantled the Shai Hasaikai perimeter in under 4 minutes? My father mentioned him before, Momo said, her voice slightly unsteady. He said Blue Sun's raw output and combat efficiency are among the few things in this country that can rival Endeavor's. The whisper spread through the departing students like wildfire. By the time they reached the locker rooms, everyone would know, including Shoto Todoroki. DABI ignored the murmurs. He pulled out 3 protein bars, tossing one to each of the boys. He didn't look at them with pride, but with the cold appraisal of a mastersmith looking at raw or, based on quirk potential and current physical integration. DABI said, his voice a smooth, resonant baritone. You 3 should be the strongest of this year, but your current standing is messy. He pointed at Midoriya. Though your control over your quirk sucks, the raw power is immense. So you, first. Then at Shoto Todoroki. You only use ice, so you are third. Fix it, or you will be the first one to drop in a real war. Finally at Bakugo. You, second. Great instincts, but you rely too much on them. What? Bakugo's palms crackled with miniature, furious explosions. How the hell is Deku first? I crushed the overall score. Scores are for bureaucrats, kid, DABI said, turning his back and walking toward the lockers, his hands in his pockets. I am looking at who survives the longest when the lights go out. Bakugo lunged, but was caught by Aizawa's capture scarf. Aizawa sighed, rubbing his temples. Training starts at 8 o'clock tomorrow. Don't be late. DABI's warm-ups are less forgiving than mine. And then he walked away too. Behind them, chaos erupted. How can Midoriya be first? Right? He barely passed. But Bakugo came in second overall in the test. And Todoroki was fourth. Bakugo was still cursing, while Kirishima was trying to calm him down. Shoto Todoroki stood perfectly still, staring at DABI's retreating back with his heterochromatic eyes. Something about him felt a bit familiar. Back at UA, Class 1A was suiting up in their hero costumes for the first time. The battle trial episode. There wasn't much for DABI to do here. Even Aizawa wasn't attending, despite the class technically being his responsibility. So what was DABI right now? An assistant teacher? He decided to treat it as an opportunity to take the day off. All Might could handle 19 kids throwing punches around a building for an afternoon. The three of them were walking down a shopping street in Mizudafu. DABI on one side, Rumi on the other, and Eri between them, gripping both their hands and using the leverage to swing herself forward every few steps. Each swing lifted her feet off the ground for about half a second, and each time she did it, she giggled like it was the funniest thing that had ever happened to her. Papa. Why are we walking instead of taking a bus? DABI didn't answer immediately. He adjusted his grip on her hand as she launched into another swing. It's good for your health, he said. Rumi laughed, loud enough that a couple walking past them turned to look. She bent down and scooped Eri up with one arm, settling the girl against her hip like she weighed nothing. Don't lie to kids, Patchwork. I am not lying. Walking is good for. Your papa gets motion sickness, Rumi said to Eri, ignoring him completely. On buses, in cars, in trains. That's the real reason he runs everywhere. It's not because he is cool or dedicated or whatever story he is telling you. He just gets nauseous. Eri's mouth formed a small, perfect O. She looked at DABI with an expression that was equal parts fascination and concern, like she had just learned something fundamental about the universe. And there goes my image, DABI said. He rubbed the back of his neck with his free hand. The perfect, strong, dependable father. Gone. Just like that. He said it like a joke, and mostly it was, but somewhere underneath, in a place he didn't look at too often, the word perfect snagged on something. He knew what an imperfect father looked like in painful detail, the kind you carried in your skin, literally, and spent your entire adult life trying not to repeat. He wanted to be different, badly enough that even a dumb joke about bus sickness could hit a little harder than it should. Eri squirmed in Rumi's arms. She twisted around and reached both hands toward DABI, fingers opening and closing. Papa, Papa, take me. It wasn't a request, but a demand. Something only a small child can make without any self-consciousness. Arms already outstretched with the complete expectation that she would be caught. DABI took her. She settled against his chest immediately, one hand grabbing a fistful of his jacket, and looked up at him from about 6 inches away. But Papa is still the best, she said. Yeah, the best in the world. She paused, thinking, her face scrunched up like this required serious calculation. No, in the universe. Another pause. And even bigger than the universe? Even bigger. DABI laughed, not the dry exhale he did at work or the flat sound he made when Bakugo said something stupid in class. A real one starting somewhere in his chest. Rumi watched this from 2 steps behind. Her expression cycled through several things in quick succession before settling on something she probably would have called annoyance if anyone asked. Then what about me? She said. Eri turned her head, still pressed against DABI's chest. You are the best too, Mama. That doesn't work. Rumi caught up to them in one long stride, falling back into step at DABI's side. There can only be one best. That's what the word means. Eri looked troubled by this. She glanced between the two of them, DABI's face, then Rumi's, then back, clearly trying to solve a problem that didn't have a solution she was happy with. You're both the best, she said firmly, like that settled it. That's not how. Rumi. DABI glanced at her over Eri's head. Let her have it. Rumi turned her face away. Fine. Eri, who had already moved on from the conversation entirely, pointed at a shop window across the street. Something pink and sparkly had caught her attention. Papa, look. Can we go there? The shop turned out to sell children's clothes, which was half the reason they were out today anyway. Eri needed new dresses. She had been growing fast, the way kids do when they're finally eating regularly and sleeping in a warm place, and half her wardrobe from 3 months ago didn't fit anymore. DABI had noticed last week when her sleeves stopped reaching her wrists. Rumi actually had work today, but she skipped it with a, I am also joining in. Inside the shop, Eri disappeared into the racks with a focus and intensity she didn't apply to anything else in her life. She emerged every few minutes holding something up. A yellow dress with small flowers on it, a red cardigan 3 sizes too big, and a pair of shoes with little wings on the ankles. Those are cute, Rumi said about the shoes. Yep, a bit too cute actually, DABI said. Eri held the shoebox against her chest on the way to the next shop like it contained something precious and breakable. Her other hand was back in DABI's, swinging again, and she was humming something tuneless and repetitive that she had probably heard on TV. The toy store was next. This one was Eri's idea. She had spotted it from half a block away with the unerring radar children have for places that sell things they want. DABI had said, "We will see," which Eri had correctly interpreted as yes, and Rumi had said nothing, which Eri had also correctly interpreted as yes. It was a small place. Cramped aisles, too much stock, the kind of store that had been there for 20 years and never updated the layout. Eri wandered through it slowly, touching things, picking them up and putting them back with a care and deliberateness that made DABI's chest do something he didn't have a name for. She had spent most of her life not being allowed to want things. The fact that she could walk through a store and touch what she wanted and know that nobody was going to hurt her for it, that was still new. She returned holding a stuffed cat, white, floppy-eared, nearly the size of her torso, and lifted it toward him without saying a word, simply watching him as she held it out. "You want that one?" She nodded. He bought it. Outside, Eri walked between them again with the cat tucked under one arm, the shoebox swinging in a bag from Rumi's hand, and the sun coming through a gap in the buildings to land on the 3 of them in a way that nobody noticed because they weren't thinking about it. "Hungry," Rumi said. "Yeah," DABI said. "I was asking Eri."
Eri nodded seriously.
"Hungry. Then let's eat." They kept walking. Eri's humming picked up again. Same melody, looping back on itself every few bars, like she kept forgetting where it was supposed to go. "Papa." Who was the lady we visited at the hospital this morning?" DABI didn't answer right away. His stride stayed the same, but his hand tightened around Eri's, just slightly, for a second before it relaxed again. "Someone really close," he said. "Is she sick?" "Yeah." "Oh." Eri thought about this for a few steps, her free hand squeezing the stuffed rabbit against her side. "I hope she gets better quickly. She looked really nice." She tilted her head up at DABI. Kind of like Papa, actually. She was just talking, saying whatever came into her head, with no filters or awareness of what the words meant or where they landed. She didn't know who the woman in the hospital bed was, what the name Todoroki meant to her father, or why he had chosen white flowers and that specific brand of Mekon oranges for the fruit basket. DABI shook his head slightly. Rumi stayed quiet too. The woman they had visited was Rei Todoroki, DABI's mother. She had been in that hospital for years. A long-term psychiatric ward? clean and quiet and staffed by people who were careful with her. The room had flowers in it when they had arrived that morning. Not fresh, a few days old, petals starting to curl at the edges. DABI's from his last visit, because this wasn't the first time. He had been going for a while now, dropping by every few weeks, sometimes more often, always the same routine. Flowers and fruit left with the nurse at the front desk. A few words, "For the patient in room 312, please," and then he would leave. He never went inside the room. Across all those visits and trips across the city, bringing carefully chosen flowers and the fruit he remembered she liked from a childhood that now felt like it belonged to someone else. He had never once walked through her door and let her see his face. It wasn't that he didn't want to. It would have been simpler if he didn't. Easier to stop caring and tell himself she belonged to a life he had already left behind. He just couldn't do it. To stand in front of her and reveal himself when he didn't even know if he was still her son anymore after taking over this body. So he left things with the nurse and he left. But today was different. Ari had been with him, and when they had arrived at the hospital, DABI had done his usual thing, handed the flowers and the bag of fruit to the nurse and turned to leave. Ari had looked up at him and said, "Can I give them to her?" Just like that, with zero context and no understanding of what she was asking. She simply wanted to hand the nice lady some flowers because it felt like a fun thing to do. And DABI had stood there in that hallway for about 5 seconds, not moving, before he said, "Okay." So Ari had gone in. Small and careful, carrying flowers that were almost as tall as she was, and she had walked up to the bed and held them out. And Ray had looked down at this tiny girl with white hair and red eyes and a smile that had no history behind it. And she had taken the flowers and thanked her, and Ari had said, "You're welcome," and that was it. DABI had watched from the hallway, through the narrow gap in the door, without stepping inside. Rumi had been standing next to him, not saying a word. "But why didn't you go see her too?" Ari asked now on the street, in the sun, with her rabbit and her new shoes and no idea what she was pulling at. DABI opened his mouth. "Well, Ari," Rumi said, cutting him off. She shifted the shopping bags to her other hand and looked down at the girl still swinging between them. "Your papa is actually a scaredy cat." DABI turned to look at her. "Hey, that's... You are making my image even worse." "What image?" "The one where you can't ride a bus." That was already bad enough without adding, "Papa is scared?" Ari looked up at him with wide eyes, not mocking but genuinely trying to understand how someone who fought villains and set things on fire could be scared of a lady lying in a hospital bed. "Yeah, I am," DABI replied. "Did you do something wrong, Papa?" "I did." "Then it's easy," she said matter-of-factly. "Just say sorry and the nice lady will forgive you." "Will she?" "Yes. Nobody can hate Papa." "Ah. Thank you, cute cheeks," DABI said, leaning down to give her a kiss. "Can you two please stop with the father-daughter chat?" Rumi complained. "You're leaving me out." "All right, sweet cheeks," DABI said, pulling her into a side hug. "That alone won't be enough." Unforeseen Simulation Joint, USJ, Training Facility. Right in their first week of school, the UA High already began to take their first-year students through various training simulations. And one of them is USJ Training Facility. The day had started normally enough. Class 1A had boarded the bus to the USJ for rescue training with 13 and their homeroom teachers. The students were excited. This was their first major off-campus training exercise. Still a little pale from the bus journey, DABI stood beside Aizawa at the front of the facility, scanning the massive dome structure. Different disaster zones spread out before them. Shipwreck, landslide, fire, mountain, flood. Each designed to simulate real rescue scenarios. His system panel flickered in his vision. Super Soldier 91 out of 100%. The percentage had remained stuck for weeks, refusing to budge. He had pushed himself harder than ever training, fighting, testing his limits, but 91% seemed to be a wall he couldn't break through. Though it didn't matter right now. Today was supposed to be simple training, or at least it was meant to be. When the purple vortex tore open the fabric of space in the center plaza, DABI didn't flinch. He felt a grim sense of relief finally. Right then, dozens of figures emerged from the portal villains, based on their varied appearances and aggressive postures. 13. Protect the students. Aizawa's capture weapon unfurled from his neck. But DABI was already moving. Recognizing the purple mist immediately, Kurogiri, the teleportation villain capable of scattering the students across the facility and leaving them isolated and vulnerable. Can't let that happen. Blue flames erupted around DABI's hands as he launched himself over the railing. A straight drop to the plaza below, using bursts of fire to slow his descent. Kurogiri's yellow eyes tracked his movement. How imprez! DABI's fist, wreathed in concentrated blue flame, connected with the mist body before the villain could finish speaking. The fire was hot enough that even Kurogiri's gaseous form recoiled, his portal destabilizing. You are not scattering my students, DABI said coldly as his other hand grabbed the metal collar holding Kurogiri's physical form together, the one solid part of his body, and heated it until it glowed red. Obviously, DABI knew the USJ attack was coming and could have warned the HPSC or Nizu, yet he chose to let it unfold with only minimal, localized preparations. Why? At 91%, super soldier. His cellular structure has plateaued. He was once again stuck, and the only thing he can remember to move forward is to once again face a near-death stimulus like before. He needs a fight that pushes him to the brink of death. Yeah, he sounds like a maniac to risk everything for his own goals and progression. But he just also can't let himself settle. Kurogiri shrieked and tried to warp away, but DABI's grip was iron. Another blast of flame forced the villain to maintain corporeal form or risk dispersing completely. Within seconds, he was down, the metal collar fused and smoking, his consciousness fading. One threat neutralized. From above, the students watched in stunned silence as their assistant teacher took down a villain in less than 10 seconds. Below, Aizawa was already engaged. His capture weapon snared 3 villains at once, yanking them off balance. His quirk activated, red eyes glowing as he erased multiple quirks simultaneously. The underground hero moved like a master, tackling between opponents, never staying still long enough to be hit. Every movement was economical and precise without any flashy heroics. It was a pure professional combatant in the field. Watch carefully, 13 said quietly to the students. This is how pro heroes fight. DABI scanned the plaza from his position over Kurogiri's unconscious form. Most of the low-level villains were manageable. Aizawa could handle them, but at the center of the plaza stood 3 figures that made DABI's blood run cold. A man covered in severed hands, Tamura Shigaraki, the leader. Beside him stood 2 massive creatures, humanoid yet wrong, with exposed brains, black skin, and grotesque musculature. Nomu. But are there 2 of them? That wasn't right. In the original timeline, there had only been 1 Nomu at USJ, so the second meant events were already deviating. Shigaraki was scratching at his neck frantically, looking around the facility. Where is he? Where is All Might? He is supposed to be here. The schedule said he would be here. His voice rose to a petulant scream. This is all wrong. Nothing is going right. Kurogiri got taken down by some nobody. Where is All Might? One of the students, Kirishima, shouted from above. What kind of villain attack is this? There are so many of them. They seem organized, Yaoyorozu observed, her voice tight with fear. This can't be a random attack. Shigaraki's tantrum intensified. He grabbed one of his own hands, the severed one on his face, and adjusted it violently. Fine. If All Might isn't here, we will just kill everyone else. That will make him come. He pointed at Aizawa. Nomu, kill him. One of the massive creatures moved. It moved with impossible speed for something that size. One moment it was standing beside Shigaraki, the next it was airborne, covering the 50-meter distance to Aizawa in less than a second. Aizawa saw it coming, barely, and tried to dodge, but the Nomu was already on him. Massive fist pulled back for a killing blow. From the observation deck, Midoriya saw it happening in slow motion, the Nomu about to crush his teacher. His legs moved instinctively, one for all crackling to life. Then something passed by at the plaza, a blur of heat and speed. The temperature in the entire dome spiked as a wave of intense heat washed over the students, making them stumble back. The air itself seemed to ignite, and suddenly DABI was there. He had crossed the distance from Kurogiri's position to Aizawa's location in the space between heartbeats. His arms were crossed in front of him, blocking Nomu's punch just inches from Aizawa's face. The impact created a shockwave that cracked the concrete beneath their feet. Thank me later, DABI grunted, muscles straining against Nomu's inhuman strength. Then the second Nomu joined the fight. It came from DABI's blind side, fist slamming into his ribs with enough force to send him flying. He crashed through a concrete barrier, tumbling across the ground before catching himself mid-roll. DABI stood, coughing, blood splattered on the ground. Damn, this is going to be difficult. For a moment he wondered if he might have messed things up, but this wasn't the time for self-blame. He just had to take responsibility. He looked at Aizawa. Get back. Your quirk won't work on these things. They are bioengineered, not quirk-based regeneration. You will just make yourself a target. I am not leaving you to... Aizawa started. That wasn't a request. DABI's voice carried absolute authority. Protect the students. That's your job. Before Aizawa could argue, Shigaraki cackled and pointed at the underground hero. Oh, trying to run? Nomu, get. DABI's flames roared to life, forcing both Nomus to focus on him instead. Your fights with me. What followed was barely comprehensible to the watching students. The battle moved too fast to track properly. One moment DABI was in the plaza, the next he was 50 meters away in the landslide zone, locked in combat with both Nomu simultaneously. Everywhere they had moved, it was disaster incoming, and the very air combusted from the heat of his flames. They fought in the ruins, across the water, through the fire zone. Ironic, given DABI's quirk. They even fought midair, all three figures suspended for impossible moments as they exchanged blows. Holy crap, Kirishima breathed. Is that even possible? The heat output alone should be killing him, Yaoyorozu said, her analytical mind struggling to process what she was seeing. How can human bodies withstand that level of thermal radiation? But DABI kept fighting. His breathing technique pushed his body beyond normal limits. The super soldier serum at 91% gave him strength and durability no human should possess. His flames burned hotter than they ever had before. But it wasn't enough. To Nomu was too much. They had regeneration that could recover from anything short of complete destruction and had strength that exceeded even All Mights and speed that matched the fastest heroes. And they didn't get tired. A powerful fist caught DABI in the stomach. He doubled over, blood spraying from his mouth. Before he could recover, the second Nomu grabbed him and slammed him into the ground so hard the concrete cratered. Watching from the mountain zone where he had been scattered by a villain, Todoroki felt something strange in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation, especially those flames. DABI's blue flames were so intense, controlled, and beautiful. Is fire supposed to be that strong? His whole life, Endeavor had told him fire was powerful but crude, that ice was more versatile, but this was pure control of mastery. Every time a flame erupted, it was exactly as hot as needed with no wasted energy. Back in the plaza, DABI was on his knees. Blood ran from his nose, his mouth, and a cut above his eye. His hero costume was torn and burned. Ironic that his own flames had damaged it. "This isn't working," he muttered, forcing himself to stand. "Gotta separate them first." He feinted at one Nomu, then blasted himself backward with an explosive burst of flame, landing near the entrance. Both Nomu pursued, but DABI was faster. He rocketed upward, using fire propulsion to launch himself through the already damaged ceiling of the USJ. The students gasped as he disappeared into the sky above the facility. "Where is he going?" Urarika cried. The answer came seconds later. DABI fell from the sky like a meteor, blue flames trailing behind him. He had positioned himself directly above one of the Nomu, and gravity plus fire propulsion accelerated him to terminal velocity. His fist, wreathed in condensed flame so hot it glowed white, connected with Nomu's skull. The shockwave shattered every remaining window in the facility. Students stumbled, some falling to their knees from the pressure wave. The sound was deafening, like thunder concentrated into a single point. When the dust cleared, one Nomu was embedded in the ground up to its waist. The concrete around it melted to glass from the heat. Down but not out, it was already regenerating. Below them, Aizawa cursed under his breath, still fighting off the low-level villains that kept trying to reach the students. "Show off." DABI landed hard, his legs nearly buckling. He was breathing heavily now, the rhythm of total concentration breaking down slightly. His body was reaching its limits. "One down," he gasped. "Now for." "Won the plaza." "Wait." From the observation deck, Kirishima pointed down. "What the hell is he doing? Why isn't he using his fire swords? Why is he just throwing hands at that thing? Cut it up already." After being trained by DABI a few times, they all knew his fighting style involved blades made from his blue fire. Seeing him abandon them in a fight this brutal made no sense. And the question hung in the air. They had seen those blades before. Lethal, elegant, and able to carve through steel like paper. Against monsters like these, swords seemed like the obvious answer. "Shut the hell up, shitty hair," Bakugo snapped. He leaned so far over the railing his feet barely touched the floor, knuckles white around the metal bar, sparks crackling in his palms. "Think for a second, you extras," he snarled. "Look at those freaks. That thing's soaking up the impact." His eyes stayed locked on the battlefield. If he spreads the fire out into blades, it won't hit hard enough. So he is dumping everything into his fists and compressing that blue fire and releasing it all at once. A beat. He is trying to overload their regeneration before their cells can knit back together. "But the recoil," Yaoyorozu whispered, her hand over her mouth. "Yeah." Bakugo spat, a flicker of grim respect crossing his face. To hit that hard, he is basically setting off a grenade in his own fist every time he swings. DABI hit the ground with the heavy, final thud of a man whose center of gravity had been forcibly uprooted. The impact drove the oxygen from his lungs, and his knees nearly buckled under the sheer kinetic load. His chest heaved in ragged, strained intervals, the steady rhythm of total concentration breathing, the foundation he had maintained since the portal opened, was fracturing. His lungs felt like they were lined with glass, each pull of air a desperate attempt to satisfy a body that was reaching systemic failure. "One down," he rasped, the words thick with the copper taste of blood, as he wiped his mouth with the back of a charred glove and forced his legs to steady. "Now for." The sentence never reached its end as the second Nomu struck from his blind side, the impact landing with a sickening, wet crunch of ribs against reinforced muscle. Before DABI could even attempt to find his footing, the creature's momentum drove him through the 3-foot-thick reinforced wall of the conflagration sector. Concrete erupted in a spray of gray dust and rebar as they disappeared into the roaring simulation fire. Inside, the environment was a hellscape of artificial ruin and very real heat. DABI barely managed to roll as Nomu's fist cratered the floor where his head had been a millisecond prior. He surged upward, channeling a counterpunch aimed squarely at the creature's exposed brain matter. The strike landed with the force of a hydraulic press, snapping Nomu's head sideways, but the creature didn't even blink. It caught DABI's follow-up kick, seized him mid-motion, and hurled him across the room like a rag doll. He smashed through 3 burning support beams, his body a blur of motion until he hit a structural pillar with a crack that shook the entire building. But DABI didn't stay down. He rose again before the dust settled, flames erupting from his palm in a concentrated blast that swallowed. A concentrated blast calibrated at exactly 1,200 degrees Celsius swallowed the Nomu. For a heartbeat, the monster was a silhouette in a sun-bright inferno. But as the flames thinned, the charred flesh simply healed itself back together. In the observation deck, the students of Class 1A were paralyzed with a mix of terror and awe. For the first time, this wasn't a hero lesson, it was a slaughter unfolding before them. "That thing," Jairu whispered, her hands trembling. "I can hear its pulse through the floor. It's too mad." Another impact shook the building as Nomu's fist drove into DABI's stomach and lifted him clear off the ground before slamming him down again. Kaminari winced as another impact shook the monitors. He is taking hits that would level a building. How is he still standing? On the screen, DABI forced himself upright again, shoulders rising with a slow breath despite the blood running down his chin. Nomu struck him again. He staggered back and still stood. Midoriya leaned forward slightly. "Look at his face." The others followed his gaze. DABI was broken, one arm hanging at a grotesque angle, half dislocated. His gear burned away to reveal skin beginning to char from within. Yet, the corner of his mouth was lifted into a jagged, defiant grin. Even Bakugo was in disbelief. What a maniac! Is he actually smiling? Midoriya felt a strange tightness in his chest as he watched. After 10 months of harsh drills, relentless conditioning, and combat exercises under DABI, Midoriya had often wondered how someone who seemed so deceptively casual could push others so far beyond their limits. Even so, this was different. Midoriya had known DABI was strong. Anyone respected by All Might had to be, but he had never imagined anything close to this. He glanced around the room briefly, noticing the stunned expressions of his classmates. Most of them hadn't even heard the name DABI until a few weeks ago, and now they were watching him fight 2 monsters head-on. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. All Might had quietly laughed at Midoriya's question. "Is DABI strong?" "Young Midoriya," he had said, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Never judge DABI by appearances." Midoriya remembered blinking in confusion as All Might continued. "We sparred once. Obviously, we couldn't go all out since we didn't want any of us hurt. But believe me when I say this." He had paused for emphasis. "DABI's greatest strength is not his power." Midoriya remembered tilting his head. "Then what is it?" All Might's smile had widened slightly. "It's his refusal to give up." He tapped Midoriya's chest lightly. "That man does not understand surrender. Even when his body reaches its limit, something in him keeps moving forward. That kind of determination is rarer than any quirk." Back in the present, Midoriya watched as DABI staggered back to his feet again after another crushing hit that should have ended the fight. And yet he stood, again, and again, and again, every time Nomu knocked him down. He forced himself upright with the same stubborn persistence. Midoriya swallowed, realizing All Might had been right. DABI wasn't winning through strength, but because he refused to stop, and then something strange began to happen. The flames around DABI started burning hotter. Todoroki noticed it first. "The temperature just spiked?" he said slowly. The flames around DABI weren't spreading outward, but they were growing denser, their color deepening while waves of heat rippled violently through the air. Yairozu leaned closer. How is that possible? Dark patches were spreading along Dabi's arms where the heat from his own flames had begun to char the surface of his skin. Under normal circumstances, any fighter would instinctively pull back. Dabi didn't. If anything, the flames intensified. Inside his body, something was changing. The super soldier serum, stuck at 91%, for weeks, suddenly surged forward under the brutal pressure of combat, his bloodstream carrying the compound through every fiber of his body as the internal system that monitored the transformation reacted instantly. Super soldier, 91%. The temperature in the room surged to 1,600 degrees Celsius as the blue flames sharpened into a piercing, electric sigh. And the concrete beneath Dabi's feet didn't just crack. It melted into liquid glass. Super soldier, 95%. The air hissed and snapped as atmospheric oxygen was ionized, and the flames darkened into a terrifying deep violet. Dabi's dislocated shoulder, even though it was nowhere near healing, seemed less painful. Super soldier, 98%. The pain arrived like a detonation beneath his skin as it started to reconstruct. Cells rewrote themselves mid-combat, muscle fibers tightening and reorganizing while bone density compressed into something harder and heavier. Also, his nerves began forming new pathways that accelerated every signal moving through his spine as his body tried to survive a transformation it had never been meant to undergo in the middle of a fight. However, he didn't care. You want to see a real monster? Dabi's voice was no longer a rasp. It carried a low, resonant vibration that seemed to echo through the student's bones. Super soldier, 99%. Super soldier, 100%. Evolution complete. The flames around him underwent a violent phase shift, the electric cyan and deep violet collapsing into an ultraviolet white that defied the visible spectrum. At a sustained 2,000 degrees Celsius, Dabi was effectively a mimic of the human-shaped sun. Nomu lunged just like before, but as its fist entered Dabi's immediate radius, the laws of biology failed. The air was so hot it achieved thermal dissociation. The water in the Nomu's cells flashed into steam, and its flesh vaporized into ash before it even made physical contact. Dabi's vision sharpened into a terrifying clarity. His early arachnid genome and fully developed super soldier processing merged, turning Nomu's sonic speed punch into a slow telegraphed arc. Dabi caught the fist one-handed, the impact not crashing but resonating in a low-frequency thrum of absolute power. Nomu's unblinking eyes twitched, and for the first time, the bioengineered puppet seemed to register a superior predator. Dabi tilted his head slightly. My turn. Instead of throwing a wild haymaker, Dabi executed a solar-compressed strike, the flames around his fist collapsing inward to create a vacuum of extreme pressure. The strike transferred cleanly through Nomu's torso. The creature was launched upward, its body punching through the dome of the USJ and shattering the reinforced structure as it hurtled into the sky. Dabi didn't follow immediately. For 4 full seconds, he stood still, watching, letting the distance build. Then, with the slightest shift of weight, just the tip of his right foot igniting in a controlled burst of blue flame, he vanished. The propulsion was instantaneous, a shaped detonation beneath him that sent his body skyward, closing the gap in less than a heartbeat. He reappeared directly in front of the tumbling Nomu. Mid-air with no footing, his hands had been empty a second ago, but now heat poured from his palms in a rigid, elongated stream, the flames condensing under sheer willpower and temperature differential into a solid-state plasma edge. In his free hand, a blade of burning blue emerged for the first time in this fight, humming at a frequency that split the air around it. And then he unleashed everything. Sun-breathing 13th form. Perpetual cycle. All 12 forms are combined into one continuous sequence. Each movement flowed into the next without pause or recovery. Slashes into arcs, arcs into thrusts, thrusts curving back into slashes, every strike layered over the last, building momentum, heat, and pressure in an unbroken chain. The final strike landed square against Nomu's sternum. For a fraction of a second, the world fell silent. Then the energy detonated, lighting up the sky. Flames carved through the air in precise, overlapping patterns, each successive form compounding the thermal damage of the one before it. Nomu's regeneration activated, healing cells dividing, but the cycle gave it nothing to work with. Every layer of new flesh was annihilated before it could finish forming. The healing factor was simply being outrun, crushed beneath a level of destruction it was never built to handle. Then the movement stopped. DABI hung in the air for a single suspended moment, his blade dissolving into embers around him. Below, what remained of Nomu had already gone limp. The lifeless body began to fall. Its descent was just a dead weight tearing through the air before slamming into the ground. The impact carved a crater on contact, concrete folding inward before bursting outward in a violent ring of debris as dust and shattered stone surged up. DABI followed a moment later. He killed his momentum just before impact, boots touching down at the edge of the crater as residual heat bled off his body in fading waves of blue. The flames that had engulfed him thinned, flickered, and then settled into stillness. For a long second, nothing moved. At the center of the crater, the Nomu lay twisted into itself, its frame barely holding shape. Its regeneration pulsed once, a feeble ripple across its exposed muscle, then stopped. Every cell had been cooked past the point of viability, and no amount of engineered recovery could rebuild from nothing. DABI exhaled slowly, shoulders lowering as the last traces of heat peeled off him like steam. It was over. Silence fell over the USJ. Everyone, villains, students, even Aizawa, still in the middle of subduing the last few attackers near the plaza, stopped and looked toward the smoke rising from the ruined building. At the center of the ruined plaza stood DABI, breathing hard inside a scorched circle where the ground itself turned into a molded paste of glass. Ishido spoke first. "Is it over?" DABI glanced toward the fallen Nomu. "Finally," he said. "You bird bastard. Kill him. Kill him now." Tamura Shigaraki's voice was a jagged, high-pitched shriek that shattered the quiet. He was scratching his neck with manic ferocity, blood trailing down his collar. The ground beneath the mountain zone erupted. The first Nomu, the one DABI had buried earlier, burst from the rubble. It had undergone a stress-triggered mutation, its muscles bulging into grotesque, vein-covered mountains. It moved faster than the eye could track, a blur of black shadow hitting DABI with the force of a freight train. The impact sent DABI hurtling through the reinforced masonry of the mountain zone. The wall collapsed, 100 tons of stone and rebar burying him in an instant. "Ah-ha-ha-ha! Ah-ha-ha-ha-ha!" Shigaraki's laughter echoed off the dome, hollow and terrifying. "That's what you get for stepping out of line. No one survives that. No one." In the observation area, the hope that had just begun to bloom in Class 1 vanished. "No," Uraraka whispered, her knees hitting the floor. "He can't be. There's no way," Kaminari said, his voice hollow as he stared at the dust cloud. "Even him. Nobody could take a hit like that after a fight like that." "No," Uraraka whispered, her knees hitting the floor. "He can't be. There's no way," Kaminari said, his voice hollow as he stared at the dust cloud. "Even him. Nobody could take a hit like that after a fight like that." Midoriya didn't hear any of it. He stepped forward as One for All surged to life, emerald bioelectricity snapping violently around his limbs. "I have to." Beside him, the class moved in a desperate, uncoordinated surge. Kirishima's skin cragged into jagged stone. Bakugo's palms hissed with the scent of nitroglycerin, and Shoto's right side began to frost over, his breath hitching as he stared at the spot where his teacher had disappeared. "Stand down! Why are you moving?" The student skidded to a halt, paralyzed by the sheer authority in Aizawa Shuta's voice. Aizawa stood at the center of the plaza, barely holding together, blood running from multiple cuts across his forehead. His capture weapon reduced to charred, useless ribbons hanging around his neck. Yet, his eyes burned with a terrifying, unblinking clarity. "To help your teacher?" Aizawa barked, his voice vibrating with a lethal certainty. "Look at the field. DABI is still in the fight." The certainty in his voice was absolute. Aizawa had worked with him before. He knew exactly what kind of man DABI was. He kicked the unconscious body of a villain aside, his gaze never leaving the mountain zone. "You think he is like you? He is an underground hero. Do you have any idea what that entails? It means he fights in the gutters, where applause is absent, backup is rare, and mercy doesn't exist. A man like that has already died more times than you can count and walked it off out of spite. If DABI is truly down, then the sun itself must be on its last breath. Now watch." As if responding to the call of a peer, the rubble shifted. A single hand, pale, scarred, and trembling, erupted through the jagged concrete. A ha-ha-ha. A primal, seismic roar tore from DABI's lungs, a raw release as every nerve in his body was rewritten by the 100% super soldier integration, the force of it rippling through the air like a shockwave. Heat surged in its wake, sending a chill down the villain's spines, while the students felt it crackle through them like electricity. A secondary hand clawed upward, its fingers wreathed in a flickering, ethereal ultraviolet. DABI hauled himself out of the mountain of stone, and the students collectively recoiled. The students' collective intake of breath was audible. If he had looked bad before, now he looked like something dragged back from death itself. What remained of his hero costume hung from him in burned fragments, most of the fabric torn away or fused to his skin, leaving behind a brutal map of bruises, burns, and open wounds, while dried blood covered nearly every exposed surface of his body, and his left arm dangled at a crooked angle that made it painfully obvious the bone beneath it had snapped. He took one step forward, then another, emerging slowly from the rubble with the quiet, unstoppable certainty of something inevitable, like a collapsing mountain or an approaching storm that no one could stop once it had begun. A cold chill washed over the students as the moment stripped away everything they thought they knew about heroism they had seen on TV or All Might's shining smile, the harsh, unsettling reality of a man too stubborn to die. Is this what heroes really are? For the first time, the word hero felt different. DABI stopped 10 paces from the mutated Nomu, swaying as his body fought to stabilize, then leaned aside and spat a thick glob of blood onto the white-hot concrete as silence fell, total and absolute. His turquoise eyes were glassy, unfocused from the concussion and the pain, yet they remained locked on the Nomu with a predatory steadiness that made the creature hesitate. The world held its breath. Then, snap. The sound was small, but in the vacuum of the USJ, it sounded like a gunshot. DABI's right hand had twitched, his thumb and middle finger meeting in a sharp, casual flick. The villains blinked, and Shigaraki tilted his head, confused. Everyone was confused. What was... Then the Nomu ignited. It wasn't the roaring, chaotic blue inferno they had seen before. Something far worse, and far more terrifying. The flames twisted through the air like a sentient organism, the color fluctuating between a ghostly, electric cyan and a pale, ultraviolet white. The heat radiating from it felt strangely hollow, as if the fire wasn't just incinerating flesh but stripping away the very molecular bonds of the creature's existence. Snap! The flames intensified. The Nomu took a ragged step back, the first true sign of primitive, instinctual fear it had shown since the breach began. Snap! 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 DABI's other hand joined the rhythm, his fingers trembling with the strain of his shattered bones and the raw power of the super soldier, 100% integration. Each movement sent a fresh surge of that unnatural fire crawling across the Nomu's body, weaving through its muscles like luminous vipers. And the creature began screaming. But it shouldn't be. The Nomu were engineered masterpieces of apathy. Their pain receptors cauterized and their nervous systems rebuilt to function as mindless weapons. They were incapable of suffering, and yet this one was screaming. What kind of fire is that? Shoto Todoroki murmured, his own left side pulsing with a heat that felt like a flickering candle compared to the sun standing before them. Yaoyorozu watched the flames trace swirling, mathematical patterns across the monster's hide. Patterns that looked less like a quirk and more like a cosmic law being enforced. It's beautiful, she whispered before immediately recoiling. No, I mean, it's horrific, but I get it, Jairu whispered. If DABI's flames had previously looked like a dancing sun, they now looked like the embodiment of entropy. It was sun breathing pushed to its logical, lethal extreme. Snap, 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 snap. The Nomu's super regeneration fought a losing battle. Flesh rebuilt itself in frantic, wet pulses only to be vaporized an instant later as the flames tore through the cellular structure faster than the DNA could replicate. The screaming reached a final, ragged crescendo that vibrated in the student's teeth. Then, suddenly, silence. The Nomu collapsed to its knees, its body a glowing husk of vitrified carbon. DABI lowered his hands, the snapping finally stopping. But the fire didn't go out. It kept burning, fueled by something beyond his quirk now. The massive reinforced entrance doors of the USJ suddenly detonated inward. Steel hinges tore free from their anchors, and the entire frame folded under the impact as a shockwave of splintered metal and concrete blasted across the entrance hall. A figure stepped through the dust. I am here. The declaration echoed through the shattered facility like a thunderclap. All Might stood in the destroyed doorway in his full heroic form, chest expanded. He had clearly not bothered with subtlety. The reinforced security entrance had been designed to withstand explosions, yet it now hung twisted and broken around the towering symbol of peace. For a brief moment, the symbol of peace stood still, taking in the carnage. Sections of the USJ lay in ruins. Training structures burned under lingering blue flames and villains lay unconscious across the plaza. Some weird creature lay motionless in the distance, another still smoldering under the unnatural fire. And in the center of it all, DABI remained standing. All Might's brows drew together, his usual smile replaced by a look of profound shock. What in the world happened here? Before anyone could answer, movement stirred behind Shigaraki. Purple mist began gathering in the air, first as a faint distortion before thickening into the unstable silhouette of Kurojire's form. His body flickering as if his earlier damage had not fully dispersed and he was forcing himself back together through sheer effort. Tamura Shigaraki, the distorted voice urged. We must retreat immediately. All Might has arrived and the Nomu is gone. The mission has failed. No. No. Shigaraki scratched frantically at his neck. We were supposed to kill him. We were supposed to prove the system is a lie. This wasn't supposed to happen. That glitch wasn't supposed to be here. Before he could finish, a sharp crack echoed through the facility. A gunshot. The sound cut through the facility with sharp, metallic precision as the bullet struck Shigaraki's shoulder, the impact snapping him sideways and spraying red across the pavement. What? Another shot rang out almost instantly, but the purple mist surged forward as Kurojire's warp gate swallowed the projectile, the bullet vanishing into the void before it could reach its mark. Across the battlefield, figures began appearing at the edge of the complex. Additional pro-heroes had arrived. Among them, Tenya Ida. The class representative sprinted across the broken plaza with engine-powered urgency, having successfully escaped the facility earlier to alert UA, and return with reinforcements. Shigaraki stared at the horizon, his manic grin twisting into a snarl of pure hatred. Cheaters. They are all cheaters. Now, Tamura Shigaraki. Kurogiri's voice was urgent, flickering with instability. A swirling vortex erupted beneath Shigaraki's feet, dragging him downward mid-tantrum. The warp gate attempted to snag the two down Nomu, but the air around them was a lethal ultraviolet barrier. Kurogiri's mist couldn't solidify. The sheer thermal output of DABI's lingering flames was ionizing the fog before it could gain mass. This isn't over. Kurogiri's distorted voice echoed as the portal collapsed into a pinpoint. We will return. The mist vanished before the sentence could finish, leaving the USJ in silence once more. All Might surveyed the devastation, his gaze settling on the observation deck where the students stood clustered, shaken, pale, but unharmed, with 13 likely guarding them throughout. Aizawa was limping across the plaza, a mask of blood and grit, but his eyes remained sharp. Finally, the symbol of peace turned toward the center of the scorched glass circle. DABI. Young DABI, All Might said carefully as he stepped forward. Are you? DABI's knees buckled. All Might moved in a golden blur, crossing the distance in a heartbeat to catch the younger man before he hit the blackened concrete. DABI. Sensei. The cry went up from the deck. Midoriya didn't wait. Vaulting over the railing, total concentration breathing, kicking in as he dropped into the plaza and sprinted toward him. The others followed, Bakugo, Shoto, and Uraraka, pulled forward by the same force, drawn to the man who had just redefined their understanding of limits, and they reached him together as Midoriya helped All Might ease DABI onto his back, his hands trembling against the scorched fabric of his suit. DABI's breathing was an unrhythmic, wet rattle, the sound of lungs struggling against internal hemorrhaging. Someone call an ambulance. Ida was already barking into his phone. We need medical transport with high thermal containment. Recovery girl. Get her on the line. Uraraka added, her voice cracking. All Might knelt, his massive hand checking the pulse at DABI's neck. He is still breathing. Aizawa limped over, his own shattered arm forgotten. Of course he is. I told you he is too spiteful for the afterlife. Deep within the quiet, neurological darkness of DABI's subconscious, a translucent interface flickered to life. It didn't care about the sirens or the crying students. It only cared about his progression. Super Soldier 100 out of 100% check. Arachnid genome unlocked. Warning. User's body sustained grade 4 thermal and kinetic trauma. Beginning emergency repairs. Estimated recovery time 72 hours. Lifespan remaining. Hidden days. The Super Soldier serum was finally complete and the next stage of evolution was unlocked. Yet something strange had changed. His lifespan was in question, as though some deeper biological process was struggling to compensate for the damage. DABI knew none of this. His consciousness had slipped too far into darkness. The USJ incident was over. Class 1A had survived their first true villain attack, but they had also witnessed something none of them would ever forget. What it meant to be a hero. The refusal to fall when every instinct demanded it. The willingness to burn everything left to protect those behind you, even if you collapsed the moment the battle ended. UA High School Medical Ward. Recovery Girl had witnessed half a century of hero work. Heroes crushed beneath buildings and villains reduced to ash. But the young man she had seen growing from his teenage years, now lying on the high-intensity medical bed, had always been a medical impossibility. Hold on, she muttered, her lips glowing as she channeled her quirk. Just hold on, you stubborn, reckless fool. DABI's body wasn't merely damaged. It was actively tearing itself apart from within. Unknown to her, the Super Soldier serum, now fully integrated, had turned his immune system into a hyper-aggressive legion. And every time she attempted to accelerate his cellular division, his white blood cells reacted with violent efficiency, treating the healing energy as a foreign invader. Worse still, the cancerous, necrotic tissues are once again fighting back. And there was something else that she couldn't identify. The mutated cells were multiplying at an exponential rate, fueled by the very serum meant to save him. His cells were undergoing rapid changes, mutations that didn't follow any medical pattern she recognized. Some kind of transformation was happening at a cellular level, and she had no idea if it was helping or killing him. The hallway surgical waiting area. Outside, the air was heavy with the scent of ozone and unwashed grief. The entirety of Class 1A had effectively occupied the wing, refusing the orders of the faculty to return to their class. Nobody spoke much. The shock of what they had witnessed was still too fresh. The silence was finally broken by the sharp, rhythmic clack of boots on tile. A short, spry elderly man rounded the corner, his yellow cape fluttering, a detail that tugged at the edges of Midoriya's encyclopedic hero knowledge, though the name wouldn't surface. Gran Torino stopped at the head of the hallway, taking in the scene at a glance, the shaken students, the suffocating tension, and the sealed, pressurized doors of the medical ward. He exhaled a long, weary breath that seemed to carry decades of frustration. What the hell did that brat do to himself this time? All Might noticed him first, the symbol of peace visibly shrinking under the old man's gaze. Master! He rushed over, his massive form nearly vibrating with guilt. I am so sorry. I should have been faster. If I had arrived sooner, I could have previous. Stop, Gran Torino said, the word cutting through All Might's spiraling apology like a blade. What's done is done. Where is he? Inside. Recovery Girl is leading the team, along with 3 of UA's top specialists. Aizawa approached, his expression weary but respectful. Sorahiko. Most of the students stared in confusion, unable to reconcile this tiny, elderly man with the respect the top heroes were showing him. But the silence was shattered by a small, white-haired blur racing through the crowd. Grandpa! Eri threw herself at Gran Torino, her small frame racking with sobs. He caught her automatically, the hardened warrior's expression softening into something pained and paternal. Little Eri, what are you doing here? You should be in the faculty dorms. Papa! Her small hands clutched his cape desperately. Papa was screaming. Inside, I heard him screaming. And it was true. Even through the reinforced door of the medical ward, it carried muffled, guttural, unmistakable agony so raw it made the students of Class 1 flinch as if they had been struck. Don't cry, little Eri. Gran Torino held her close, his voice gentle despite the storm of emotions on his face. He is going to be fine. Your papa has an irritating talent for surviving the impossible. The screaming from inside intensified, a jagged, high-frequency sound that vibrated the glass in the hallway, then cut off into a sudden, terrifying silence. Everyone tensed. Midoriya's breath hitched. Bakugo's hands tightened into white-knuckled fists. Then, the sound of rhythmic, thundering footsteps echoed from the far end of the hall. Rumi Usajiyama, the number 5 hero, Mirko, burst through the entrance. She was still in her hero costume, her red eyes wild and her long ears pinned flat against her skull in a predatory snarl. Where is he? She scanned the room, her presence so explosive it pushed the air out of the hallway. I got a call saying there was an incident, and then every damn person I asked went silent. She spotted Eri in Gran Torino's arms, saw the tears, and her expression went from panicked to murderous. What happened? All Might stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. Miss Mirko, we need to remain calm. Calm. My daughter is crying and nobody will tell me where DABI is. Someone better start talking in the next 3 seconds or I am kicking down every door in this building. There was a villain alliance breach at the USJ. All Might said, speaking fast. DABI moved to protect the students. He sustained some injuries. Injured. Rumi's voice dropped to something dangerous. How badly? Aizawa didn't sugarcoat it. He has been under the knife for 2 hours. We're waiting on the stabilized signal. Rumi went deathly still. It was the kind of stillness that preceded a natural disaster. Eri wiggled out of Gran Torino's arms and ran to Rumi, grabbing her hand. "Mama, it's okay," she said quickly. "The doctors are helping Papa. And Grandpa said he is going to be all right." But Eri's red eyes were filled with tears. She was trying to be brave, trying to comfort the adults, but she was just a 4-year-old girl who was terrified. "Mama," Eri said quietly, I can help. Maybe." Every hero in the hall froze. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Rumi knelt, her powerful hands gently gripping Eri's shoulders, forcing her own rage to subside for her daughter's sake. "My quirk. I can reverse things to their past state." Eri's small hands gestured uncertainly. "This morning, Papa was okay. He was eating breakfast and smiling. If I reverse him this morning, he will be okay again. Right?" The adults exchanged glances. However, if DABI were conscious, he would have been terrified, despite being overloaded with cuteness. Eri's rewind wouldn't just fix his wounds, it would delete the 100% super soldier evolution, the unlock of the arachnid genome, and the sun-breathing mastery he had nearly died to achieve. It would undo the very progress keeping him alive against cancer. "Eri, your quirk is very powerful," Gran Torino spoke, his voice heavy with caution. "But it's also volatile. If you lose control." "But Uncle Eraser is here." Eri pointed at Aizawa with childish logic. "He can stop me if I go too far. Like we practiced." The logic was flawless in its simplicity. Aizawa looked at the medical door, then at the desperate hope in the little girl's eyes. "We can't." All Might started. The medical ward door opened. Recovery Girl emerged, looking more hollowed out than any of them had ever seen her. Her gloves were stained with a dark, viscous fluid that didn't look entirely like human blood. Every eye in the hallway locked onto her like a lifeline. "Granny, Papa is okay, right?" Eri's voice was small and hopeful. Recovery Girl's expression softened into something painful. She walked over and knelt in front of the little girl, taking her small, cold hands in her own. "Sweetheart, he is stable for now, but I need to talk to your mama about something very important. Why don't you go sit with your big brothers and sisters over there for a bit, okay?" Midoriya, sensing the gravity of the shift, stood up immediately. "Eri, come sit with us. We were just about to talk about the training today. It was incredible." Eri looked uncertain, her gaze lingering on the closed door, but she nodded with a formal bow that made several hearts clench in the hallway. "Please save Papa," she said, her voice small but absolute. "I am trying, dear. I promise I am trying." As Midoriya led Eri away, Uraraka immediately fumbling for a distraction and Azui offering a piece of candy, the atmosphere shifted more seriously. Once the children were out of earshot, Recovery Girl's face turned grim. Only the inner circle remained. Aizawa, Gran Torino, Rumi, and All Might. His cancer cells are overtaking every healthy system in his body, Recovery Girl said, skipping the medical pleasantries. "The more I try to accelerate his healing, the more aggressive the malignancy becomes. It's a biological feedback loop. My quirk is fueling the fire as much as the water." Rumi's face went porcelain white. "The necrosis. It's back. It's worse," Recovery Girl continued, her voice dropping. "He has lost an immense amount of blood, and we need an AB+ transfusion immediately. Normally, the blood bank would suffice, but..." She paused, her eyes flickering with a rare medical fear. "Something is happening to him. A cellular transformation is rewriting his genetic code in real time. His body is rejecting all synthetic or non-matched biological material. It's as if his immune system has become a fortress that won't let anyone in." "Is it killing him?" All Might asked. "I don't know. It might be. or it might be the only thing keeping him alive. I can't tell. What I do know is that standard blood transfusion won't work. His body is rejecting outside blood. We need a genetic match, blood from a direct biological relative. Family? Aizawa's eyes narrowed. I thought DABI was an orphan with no records. The silence that followed was heavy with a decade of secrets. Rumi's ears were twitching rapidly. She understood what they needed to do now. We don't have time for the long version, Gran Torino snapped. He turned his sharp, hawk-like gaze toward the students. His eyes zeroed in on the boy sitting in solitary shadow. Hey, you, fire and ice kid, get over here. Shoto Todoroki stood slowly. His heterochromatic eyes narrowed in confusion. He walked toward the group, his posture defensive. What's your blood type?
Gran Torino demanded.
O negative, Shoto replied, his voice flat. O negative? It's the universal red cell donor. Relief immediately washed over the room. All right, squeeze as much as you safely can from this boy.
Gran Torino said.
Though I am certain it won't be enough. He paused, then added. You have siblings, right? Call them. Tell them to get here immediately. Why? Shoto's voice was controlled, but a spike of ice began to frost the floor near his feet. My family has nothing to do with this. Stop asking stupid questions and call them if you want to save your eldest brother. Gran Torino roared, his composure finally shattering. The words echoed in the hallway. Several students gasped, and many heads whipped around so fast he nearly gave himself whiplash. Eldest brother? Shoto's expression didn't change, but his pupils dilated until the colors of his eyes were almost swallowed by black. I don't understand. We don't have time for this. Rumi cut in, her voice tight with barely restrained emotion. Listen to me. DABI is Toya, your older brother. He didn't die at Sokoto Peak. He's been alive this entire time, and right now he's in critical condition. We need Todoroki's match to save him. Do you understand now? Do you? Shoto stood frozen, the foundations of his reality splintering as a decade of grief was rewritten in a single sentence. He struggled to reconcile the image of the cynical, lazily brilliant teacher who had been mentoring Class 1 was actually his brother he thought had burned to ashes. He stopped, his voice feeling like it was coming from miles away. You are saying the man who has been at UA for the past month is your eldest brother? Yes, All Might said, his voice a low, soothing hum designed to ground the boy. Young Todoroki, I know this is sudden news for you, but we are out of seconds. Can you call your siblings? Please. From inside the medical ward, the scream ripped through the door again. Louder now, jagged and desperate, less human than something being physically torn apart. Todoroki's hand was already moving, pulling his phone from his pocket with a mechanical, shock-induced efficiency. I will call them. The moment he stepped away, the professional mask on Recovery Girl's face faltered. I need to get back in there, she said, steadying herself. But Sorihiko, Rumi, call it a doctor's instinct because I don't fully understand what's happening to his body. But I believe he will make it through this. So don't worry too much. The screaming inside intensified, hitting a fever pitch before cutting off with a sickening, wet gagging sound. Recovery Girl didn't wait for a response before hurrying back inside. Rumi remained where she stood, ears trembling as a faint sense of relief softened her expression. Gran Torino rested a hand on her shoulder. We both know how this goes. Give it time and he'll be back on his feet, dragging himself up like he always does. Across the hall, Shoto finished his calls and he walked back toward the inner circle, his face a porcelain mask of stoicism that fooled no one. My sister Fuyumi is on her way, she's AB+, and she should be here in 20 minutes, he said, pausing briefly. I also texted my father. He's coming. Endeavor? Aizawa's eyes widened. his mind immediately calculating the political and emotional fallout. You called? He is AB plus as well, Shoto said flatly. I thought more blood might give him more time. The implications of that hung in the air. Shoto glanced at the adults. Was that a mistake? Aizawa exhaled slowly. No. You handled it well. But the atmosphere had changed. Endeavor, the number 2 hero, was currently racing toward UA. To find out that the son he had mourned and blamed himself for was alive, had become an underground hero, and was currently dying in a ward he wasn't even authorized to enter. This is going to be a disaster, Aizawa muttered. We will deal with it, Gran Torino said firmly. From the medical ward, the sounds of struggle continued. Recovery girl's voice could be heard giving urgent instructions to her, working alone to save a life that was slipping through her fingers. And in the hallway, a daughter sat with students who had watched her father nearly die protecting them, while a girlfriend tried not to fall apart, and a family that thought they had buried their son years ago rushed to the hospital to confront an impossible truth. The aftermath of the USJ incident was just beginning. Shoto Todoroki sat among his classmates in the uneasy quiet that had settled over the room. Moments earlier, he had been taken inside so the medical staff could draw his blood. But the nurse had sent him back almost immediately. Blood compatibility, it turned out, did not end with ABO and RH factors. A rapid cross-match was still required because patients could carry antibodies against lesser-known red cell antigens, especially if they had received transfusions before. The test had revealed the problem quickly. DABI's blood contained antibodies against one of those minor antigens, and Shoto's red cells carried it. If his blood were transfused, DABI's immune system would attack the donor cells and destroy them inside his bloodstream. While the explanation was being given, Shoto remained in a faint daze. The revelation that DABI was his eldest brother, Toya, had landed like a physical strike, though his face remained perfectly composed. Years of growing up under Endeavor had trained him to control every expression, to reveal neither confusion nor vulnerability. Inside, however, his thoughts were in complete disarray. Todoroki, Kirishima said. He was trying for his usual manly optimism, but his voice wavered. I had no idea Dabi-sensei was your older brother. Man, you have got such a manly brother. Seriously, he is a beast. The words hung awkwardly in the air. I didn't know either, Shoto said flatly. A ripple of confusion went through the students. Bakugo's eyes narrowed, while Midoriya looked up too. My brother died in an accident when he was 12 years old, Shoto continued. He didn't know why he was talking, only that the silence felt more dangerous than the truth. The official report said the heat was so intense they couldn't even recover a body. We held a funeral over an empty casket. Oh, Kirishima deflated instantly, his shoulders sagging. I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to. He was clearly trying to help but making it worse. I didn't know Dabi-sensei had such a cute daughter either. Azui interrupted, her blunt honesty cutting through Kirishima's fumbling better than forced enthusiasm. She is adopted, Midoriya added quietly. That at least made sense. It fit what they knew of their assistant teacher. Todoroki fell silent again as his classmates struggled to process everything. The villain attack, watching their teacher nearly die protecting them, and now the revelation that he was supposedly Todoroki's dead brother. It was too much for one day. 20 minutes later, Fuyumi Todoroki rushed through. Her white and red hair was disheveled, and she was still in her elementary school teaching attire. I am here, Shoto called and said it was a life-or-death emergency. Gran Torino intercepted her with the speed of a man half his age. No time for explanations, we need your blood now. Someone's life is measured in minutes. Are you AB+? Yes, but follow me. Now. The sheer authority in the veteran's voice stifled her protests. Rumi appeared at her side. her red eyes rimmed with a desperation so profound that Fuyumi's instinct to help overrode her confusion. "Please," Rumi whispered, and that single word, from one of the fiercest heroes in Japan, was all Fuyumi needed. "Okay, yes, whatever you need." They ushered her into the sterile white glare of the ward without explanation or introductions, and Recovery Girl already had the equipment ready before Fuyumi even settled onto the mattress. "Lie down," Recovery Girl instructed. "This is going to be a heavy draw." Fuyumi complied, rolling up her sleeve. The needle went in smoothly, and she watched her blood flow through the tube toward another patient. For the first time, she looked at the patient receiving her blood. He was a wreckage of humanity. Bandages covered the majority of his frame. His skin, where visible, was a map of fresh burns and old, jagged scars. His face was partially hidden by an oxygen mask, but she could see the sharp, aristocratic line of his jaw and the shock of stark white hair. Something in Fuyumi's chest tightened, a phantom resonance, like a melody she hadn't heard in a decade. "Who?" she started. "Don't talk," Recovery Girl said gently. "Save your strength. We might need more than one donation." So Fuyumi lay there in silence, watching her blood flow into a stranger who somehow didn't feel like a stranger at all. An hour later, Natsuo Todoroki arrived. At 19, he was a university student training to become a doctor, but the moment Shoto's message came through during an exam, he left without hesitation. "What's going on?" he demanded, bursting into the hallway. Shoto said it was an emergency. "Is it the old man? Did he finally? We need a blood donation."
Gran Torino said bluntly.
"AB positive is your blood group, right?" "I am, but I need to know why." "Then move your ass." Natsuo looked at Aizawa, then at the students, and finally at the closed door where he could hear his sister's call. Without another word, he followed the old man inside. 30 minutes passed. Dabi's condition remained unknown, but at least the screaming had stopped. In the medical world, silence could be a mercy or a death sentence. For the people in the hallway, they chose to believe it was the former. Outside, the students finally left. Principal Nizu had made it clear what happened at the USJ was classified. The students were instructed, firmly, not to discuss the details with anyone outside UA until the official report was released. Most of them left reluctantly. They wanted to stay and make sure their teacher would be okay. But their parents were calling, and it was getting late. Only the Todoroki siblings had remained. Eri had finally fallen asleep, curled up in one of the waiting room chairs with Rumi's jacket as a blanket. That's when Gran Torino emerged from the medical ward. He looked tired. "He is stable for now," the veteran announced, his voice a dry rasp. The collective exhale of relief was audible.
Gran Torino continued.
"I suppose you want explanations," he told them. Toya Todoroki hadn't perished at Sokoto Peak. Instead, he had been left a broken thing, rebuilt by hands that cared nothing for his soul, and had somehow clawed his way back from the edge of villainy only to collapse on Gran Torino's doorstep. He explained the name DABI, a name taken to bury a past that was too painful to carry, and his choice to never contact his family. He is really Toya?" Fuyumi's voice was a fragile whisper, her face shimmering with tears. "My big brother is alive." "He was alive this whole time?" Natsuo's hands were shaking. 10 years? And he never. "Why?" Fuyumi asked, her heart breaking. "Why didn't he come home?" Gran Torino's expression was hard. "That's a question Dabi has to answer himself when he wakes up." He paused, his gaze softening as it settled on the siblings. "But you might already know the answer. Deep down, all of you know why the boy never looked back at the house that broke him." The siblings fell silent. They knew, of course they did. Endeavor, their father. The relentless training, consuming obsession, and pressure placed on Toya until he finally shattered. Gran Torino walked away, leaving them to process. Across Muzutafu, Class 1A students. The students of Class 1A walked home in subdued silence, each of them carrying the weight of everything they had witnessed that day. Katsuki Bakugo moved ahead of the group with his hands buried deep in his pockets. He had seen the entire fight, how DABI got knocked down and got back up again, over and over, even when every sensible part of the situation said the fight was already over and quitting would have been the logical choice. Bakugo couldn't help respecting that. And because of that, he had made a quiet decision. The list of people he intended to surpass had gained another name. All Might, Deku, whether Bakugo wanted to admit it or not. And now one more, the Blue Sun. Izuku Midoriya sat in his room, staring at his notebook. He couldn't stop replaying the fight, analyzing the total concentration breathing, and the way DABI's flames had achieved an ultraviolet white purity. He doesn't know when to give up. Now Midoriya understood what that truly meant. It wasn't about being reckless, but about having something worth not giving up for. Ochako Uraraka sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't shake the image of Eri, small and terrified, waiting for a father who was screaming behind a closed door. She had always wanted to be a hero to support her parents, but now she understood the cost. Heroes protect people, she thought, but who protects the heroes? Tenya Ida sat at his desk, his mind running through tactical simulations. The way DABI had prioritized threats and eliminated the teleporter first divided the enemy's attention. Even critically injured, he had been thinking 3 moves ahead. Tsuyu Azui thought about the sound of DABI's screams from inside the medical ward, how heroes suffered in ways the public never saw. Eijiro Kirishima stared at his own hardened hands in the dim light of his bedroom. He had always believed manliness was about being an unbreakable wall, a shield that never cracked. But after watching DABI, he found a new, more brutal definition. Strength wasn't measured by being untouchable, but by the stubborn resolve to rise again even after being torn apart. That's what I want to be, he resolved. The guy who doesn't stay down, no matter how much of him is left on the floor. Each student carried a different scar from the USJ, a lesson unique to their own path. But they shared one undeniable truth. Heroism wasn't found in the glory of arrival, but in the pain of what had to be given up along the way. It was the willingness to burn yourself to ash just to keep the people behind you in the light. They would never forget watching their teacher embody that principle, a living testament to the cost of protection. Aoyama residence. That evening, Yuga Aoyama sat alone in his room with his phone pressed tightly to his ear. The call had already lasted 15 minutes. He had reported everything he had seen, every proceeding of the USJ attack, the villains, and the battle that followed. And finally, the revelation. His real identity, Aoyama said quietly, is Toya Todoroki, the eldest son of the number 2 hero? Silence followed on the other end of the line. Then a single word came through. Interesting. The line went dead. Aoyama remained seated in the dark, staring at the dim screen of his phone. He didn't know if what he had just done was right. No. That was the lie he told himself. This wasn't uncertainty. It was betrayal. The agreement had been made long ago, before he was old enough to understand what it truly meant. A pact with a devil had given him a quirk, turning this quirkless child into someone special. In return, Aoyama became his eyes and ears inside the UA. I'm sorry, he thought. He wasn't even sure who the apology was meant for. His classmates, his teachers, perhaps himself? I am so sorry. But choice had never been part of the arrangement. The decision had been made years before he ever stepped through the gates of the UA. All he could do now was continue playing the role assigned to him, and hope that somehow, someday, it would end without destroying everything around him. Unknown location. All for one's hideout. Deep within a sealed chamber filled with monitors and humming life support systems. The ancient shadow known as All for One, that surrounded by darkness. Kurogiri's report lingered in his thoughts. The USJ operation had not merely failed, it had collapsed completely. All Might had not even arrived until the conflict was already over. The students had been protected, 2 Nomu had been neutralized, and Shigaraki, his chosen successor, had been overwhelmed by a single hero, an underground hero, someone All for One had once dismissed it as insignificant. And the most amusing part was that the man who ruined the plan was someone he had noticed long ago. The burned boy recovered from Sokoto Peak, and so did the child he had once tried to recruit, a vessel they had intended to rebuild, use, and eventually discard. DABI Toya Todoroki. Ironic. All for One murmured into the dark. The boy he had once dismissed as worthless had now become the very obstacle that disrupted the first step of his grand design. The spare that wasn't good enough to be a vessel had neutralized 2 Nomu monsters specifically engineered with high-tier super regeneration and shock absorption to kill the symbol of peace. Perhaps I underestimated the strength of a grudge. He had made a mistake. A rare one, but a mistake nonetheless. Toya had been dying when they found him. They rebuilt his body with advanced medical technology, but his spirit proved impossible to tame, too wild and consumed by a single, searing hatred to ever become a loyal tool. So they let him go, assuming his own flames would burn him out within weeks. Instead, he endured, thrived, and became strong enough to derail an entire operation. Tamura, All for One murmured, though his protege was nowhere in the room. It seems you now have a true rival, someone who suffered much like you did, someone cast aside and shattered by the so-called hero system. Yet where you chose to tear the world apart, he walked a different road. The next time they clashed, it wouldn't be by accident. All for One would make sure of it, because if Toya Todoroki had truly become strong enough to threaten his plans, then he was no longer a footnote. He was a variable that needed to be solved or erased. Before anything else, All for One required information. He needed to understand how that discarded vessel had grown powerful enough to dismantle 2 Nomu. He activated the communication device beside him. "Doctor," he said calmly, "I need you to review the USJ footage, specifically the hero known as Blue Sunday." There was a faint pause. "He is DABI," All for One continued, "and his true identity is Toya Todoroki." Static crackled through the line. "The Todoroki failure?" Dr. Garaki's raspy voice replied, disbelief thick in his tone. "I assumed his own quirk had completed what his injuries began years ago. His cellular degeneration was irreversible." "Your assumptions were incomplete," All for One replied coolly, the patience usually present in his voice noticeably thinner. "His potential was never a ceiling, Doctor. It was merely a basement he has since climbed out of." Garaki fell silent for a moment, clearly recalculating. "I see," the doctor finally said. "If he has stabilized that degree of thermal output without catastrophic organ collapse, then he has surpassed the limits of our previous biological projections. I will begin a full analysis immediately." The call ended. All for One leaned back into the shadows of his throne. The game board had been rearranged. New pieces were emerging from the graveyard of his past experiments, and the next generation was evolving with a desperate, frantic speed. But he didn't mind. In fact, he found it revitalizing. After more than a century of navigating predictable cycles of heroism and hubris, he appreciated a glitch in the system. It made the eventual victory feel earned rather than inevitable. "Survive, Toya Todoroki," he said to the empty room. "Clinging to life is your specialty. After all, recover, evolve, push that body to its absolute zenith." He paused, a phantom smile tugging at his scarred features. In the darkness, the ancient villain smiled. "Because the next time we meet, I won't be testing your potential. I will be claiming it." In the depths of the hideout, the only sound was the steady, rhythmic pulse of the machinery. the heartbeat of a monster waiting for his prey to ripen. What is sun breathing actually? A sword technique that enhances physical capabilities through specialized breathing patterns. DABI's fundamental problem was cellular and genetic. His body at the tissue level lacked heat-resistant cells, and the cancerous body on top of it. However, the sun breathing improved cardiovascular and muscular performance, but it couldn't fundamentally alter cellular structure or grant heat resistance. And the technique alone doesn't provide any true fire manipulation. The flames are merely a visual byproduct, while its real effect lies in enhancing strength, speed, stamina, and oxygen flow to the muscles. But that didn't mean it was useless. Enhanced oxygen circulation and overall physical conditioning helped him heal faster from burns. The extreme training increased his mental fortitude to push through pain and masterfully control his quirk. Better stamina meant he could use his quirk slightly longer before exhaustion compounded the damage. The benefits were indirect at best, perhaps a 5 to 10% improvement. In essence, it was asking whether athletic conditioning could overcome a genetic incompatibility, like wondering if marathon training would allow someone allergic to bees to safely handle a beehive. And the process itself had been hellish. Sun breathing required intense physical training that pushed the body to its absolute limits. For someone whose body was already fragile in specific ways, learning it had been torture. The harsh truth was that sun breathing was fundamentally a technique for humans fighting demons with swords. DABI needed something that addressed quirk biology, something like Endeavor's natural heat resistance or some form of quirk therapy. And the conclusion was a breathing technique, no matter how advanced, couldn't bridge a genetic mismatch. But the super soldier serum was a relatively different matter. Rather than merely increasing strength, the serum enhances the body at the cellular level, improving muscle density and efficiency, reinforcing bone structure, accelerating healing, optimizing metabolic processes, strengthening cellular regeneration, raising pain tolerance, and greatly increasing overall physical resilience. The formula was designed to refine human biology itself, bringing the body closer to its theoretical peak potential. Here, the critical question was, does peak human potential include developing heat resistance that wasn't in his genetic blueprint? The answer was complicated. The serum enhanced what already existed without rewriting DNA. DABI's DNA said, ice resistance, not fire resistance. Also, heat resistance wasn't peak human. Normal humans didn't have natural resistance to 2000+ degree flames. The serum brought you to peak human potential, and humans simply weren't fireproof. Realistically, the chances of meaningful improvement were around 30 to 40%. The most likely outcome was a compromise. His healing factor would let him recover from burns in hours instead of days. He could use his quirk more frequently with reduced consequences, and maybe could keep his cancer cells from multiplying. But he would still hurt when using his quirk. The only difference was scale. From completely unusable without suicide to usable with significant cost. Instead of third-degree burns after 30 seconds, maybe he would get first-degree burns after 5 minutes, and they would heal by the next day. That's the reason arachnid genome plays a crucial role in his genetic milestone system. The radioactive spider bite was more than a simple enhancement. It triggered a form of genetic rewriting, effectively integrating spider traits into human DNA. The result was the emergence of entirely new biological capabilities absent from normal human physiology and the heightened precognitive awareness known as spider sense. Fundamentally, it altered cellular structure at the genetic level, and this was very different from the super soldier serum, which optimized existing biology. But all three together, sun breathing, super soldier, and arachnid genome, the chances of gaining functional fire resistance jumped to 60 to 75%. Sun breathing maximized oxygen flow to superhuman cells, enhanced blood circulation for better heat distribution, and provided mental conditioning to endure pain. Super soldier serum enhancement perfected the spider hybrid cells, increasing durability by 50% on top of the spider base, amplifying the healing factor dramatically. Recovery rate increased by 500%, and ensuring peak cellular efficiency for heat dissipation. Arachnid genome rewrote cellular structure entirely, providing a base durability increase of 40%, a healing factor with a 300% recovery rate, and fundamentally new biological capabilities. Triple enhanced, DABI could use his flames for sustained periods with only minor to moderate burns that healed rapidly. He could fight multiple battles per day, use his quirk as his primary combat method, and recover between engagements. Essentially, he would become functionally cured for practical purposes, even if technically his cells still burned. If he survived and completed all 3 evolutions, his physical capabilities would be beyond imagination. Strength, 20 to 30 ton range. Speed, casual bullet timing, probably supersonic movement. Healing, Wolverine-light, serious wounds healing in hours. Durability, tank hits that would kill normal heroes. In the current world of Quick, he would be high S tier, probably surpassing even Prime All Might in many ways. The combination of Spider-Man's mobility, Captain America's peak performance, breathing technique, stamina, and blue flames would make him one of the most versatile and powerful heroes in this universe. Maybe at some point DABI would be so powerful that his fire quirk would become almost secondary to his other abilities. He would finally be able to use it, yet no longer need to rely on it, having reached his goal in the most roundabout way possible by becoming everything his father never wanted him to be. The boy who burned himself trying to master flames would become the man who transcended the need for them entirely while finally being able to use them anyway. And that was exactly what was happening to DABI's body right now. The UA High School Medical Ward. Inside the ICU, DABI's body was undergoing a transformation that defied all known medical science. Recovery Girl monitored the readings with a mixture of fascination, horror, and hope. Strands of genetic code that shouldn't exist were weaving themselves into his existing structure, and the cancer cells, once a death sentence, were being aggressively consumed, repurposed as raw fuel for his transformation. His healing factor was accelerating exponentially. Bones that had been shattered were knitting back together with density far exceeding normal human capacity. And through it all, the super soldier that had finally reached 100% completion was perfecting every change, optimizing every new capability. His system display, visible only to him in his unconscious state, showed the progress. Genetic milestone system, 3 evolution paths, breath of the sun, 100 out of 100% check. Super soldier, 100 out of 100% check. Arachnid genome, 11 out of 100%. Lifespan left. Calculating, with the blood from his siblings being pumped into him, providing the genetic material and biological resources his body needed, the transformation was proceeding. Slowly, the rattle in his chest smoothed out. The erratic heart rate stabilized into a deep, powerful thrum. He was going to survive. But when those turquoise eyes finally opened, the man who had closed them would be gone, replaced by a being that the world was not yet prepared to face. The hallway, outside, the silence remained. Fuyumi and Natsuo sat shoulder to shoulder, their worldviews fracturing as they tried to reconcile the image of their dead brother with the hero they have been hearing in the news lately. Shoto sat apart, his expression a mask of stoicism. Rumi paced the narrow corridor with uncertainty written all over her face. Gran Torino had tried to convince her to eat something, but the food sat untouched on a nearby table. Nearby, Eri slept fitfully. That's when the temperature in the hallway rose noticeably. Everyone looked up as the entrance doors opened. Endeavor strode in, still in his hero costume, flames crackling around his shoulders, who seemed to have been reached directly from a mission. At nearly 2 meters tall, with a physique built from years of intense training, he was an imposing figure. His turquoise eyes, the same eyes Shoto and Toya shared, swept the hallway with the predatory intensity of a man demanding absolute attention. "Shoto," his voice boomed. "Your message said it was urgent. What is this?" The truth was, Endeavor didn't even have his own son's contact. Nor did Shoto have his until a few hours ago, when he took it from his sister. So when the message came through, he dismissed it as a prank, some nobody testing his patience, until verification and cross-checking before the reality settled in. The number belonged to his son. He went still, eyes locking onto Fuyumi and Natsuo, before drifting to the assembled high-tier heroes. All Might, Aizawa, Mirko, and the veteran Gran Torino. "Someone tell me what's going on." Endeavor's voice dropped half a register. "Why was I told to come to UA immediately? And why are my children sitting in a hospital corridor instead of at home?" Rumi stepped into his path. Her ears were pinned flat against her skull. An instinctual sign of lethal aggression. "You are Endeavor. Enji Todoroki." "I am." Endeavor's eyes narrowed. "And you're Mirko, the rabbit hero." He looked past her, then back. "Why are you here? What does this have to do with?" "Your son is behind those doors," Rumi interrupted, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "He is fighting for his life because he stood between a class of children and a pair of bioengineered godkillers. So maybe you could tone down the number 2 act for 5 damn seconds and be a human being." Endeavor's flames flared. "My sons are right here." He gestured toward Shoto. "I can see them. So I don't know what you're—" "Not those sons," Gran Torino said. Everyone looked at him. He was sitting in one of the plastic chairs with his arms crossed, looking about as concerned with Endeavor's presence as he would be with a change in the weather. "Your other son." Endeavor literally froze, his flames dimming to almost nothing. "My other." His voice had shifted. The booming command was gone, replaced by something quiet and infinitely more dangerous. "What are you talking about?" "I don't have any." "Toya." Fuyumi stood up, her voice trembling in sadness. "They are talking about Toya, Dad." The name just sat there in the hallway. Endeavor's expression went through several changes in rapid succession. Confusion, cold disbelief, and then a flash of raw, jagged pain that he quickly tried to smother. No. The investigation confirmed. The investigation was wrong, Natsuo said flatly, his voice dripping with years of accumulated resentment. "And it gets worse. You want to hear it? You want to hear where he ended up?" Natsuo was leaning forward now, his hands shaking, and the resentment that had been compacting inside him for years was cracking through the surface. He was picked up by some freaky villains. You think about what that means? What would have happened to him if... He cut himself off, breath hitching before forcing the words out. By some miracle, he got out. He pointed at Gran Torino, his finger was trembling. If that old hero hadn't taken him in, hadn't looked after him all this time, think about where Toya would be right now. Endeavor turned to Gran Torino, the grief still lingering on his face as it sank beneath something more familiar. Anger, the one thing he knew how to wield. You held my son for 6 years and never. He asked me not to. Gran Torino didn't raise his voice, didn't uncross his arms, and didn't look particularly bothered. And after I heard about how he ended up on that mountain in the first place, I can't say I blamed the kid for wanting to stay dead. The accusation in those words was impossible to miss. Endeavor's flames roared back to life. You have no right to judge my training methods. I was preparing him to what? Rumi's voice was venomous. What were you preparing him for exactly? Because what actually happened is that your kid pushed himself until his own quirk ate him alive. He burned himself up trying to be what you wanted, and you want to stand here and talk about training methods? Seriously, you don't know what you're... Enough! All Mights chimed in, his voice carrying absolute authority. That's enough. All of you. He looked at Endeavor directly. Endeavor, your son Toya, who has been operating under the name DABI, is in critical condition because he put himself between your youngest son's class and two Nomu that should have killed everyone in that building. All Might paused. That is the only thing that matters in this hallway right now. Everything else, the blame, reckoning, and explanations, that waits until he's out of that room. Endeavor looked like he wanted to argue, his massive fists clenching until the leather of his gloves creaked. Then his eyes landed on the reinforced door of the ICU. He is really alive? The question came out quieter. Endeavor stood there, processing. For a moment, the mighty number 2 hero looked completely and utterly lost. I want to see him. He is in the ICU, Recovery Girl said, emerging from the medical ward at that moment. She looked exhausted. And even if he weren't, I wouldn't let you in. I am his fath. You're the reason he changed his name and spent 3 years hiding from his own family. Recovery Girl looked up at him. She came up to about his waist, and there was absolutely nothing in her expression that was intimidated by the size difference. I am his attending physician, and I am telling you as a medical professional that the psychological stress of seeing you right now could stop his heart. That's not a figure of speech. I mean it literally. Endeavor stared at her. You want to help your son? Then sit down somewhere over there and stay out of my way until he's stable and conscious. And when he wakes up, he gets to decide if he wants to see you. She held his gaze. Not you. Him. Endeavor looked like he had been slapped. For years, he had believed his eldest son was dead, carried that guilt, and buried it beneath his drive to be number 1. But it had always been there. And now, learning Toya was alive, had been alive this whole time, only to potentially lose him again. I will wait, Endeavor said. Old Ma, Shoto started. I said I will wait. Endeavor moved to a chair at the far end of the hall, isolated from the others, and sat down heavily. His flames extinguished completely, leaving him looking strangely diminished in the sterile light. Until he wakes up, I will be here. Nobody argued with him. The hallway fell back into a silence that was heavier than before. A silence weighted with decades of trauma, unspoken apologies, and the cold reality of a family finally forced to face its own wreckage. Inside that room, DABI's transformation continued. Arachnid genome, 15 out of 100%. DABI's cells were in a state of high-speed reauthorship. The spider DNA was weaving through his double helix, reinforcing the gaps in his genetic code. The super soldier serum acted as the perfect catalyst, optimizing the integration, while the deep tissue effects of sun breathing provided the hyperoxygenated environment necessary to fuel this metabolic miracle. And slowly, impossibly, his body was manifesting the one trait it had been denied at birth: heat resistance. It wasn't complete immunity but a localized genetic adjustment, with newly densified cell walls beginning to withstand the ultraviolet heat of his own quirk. He was finally developing the shielding for his own furnace. Arachnid genome, 20 out of 100%. The percentage climbed. In the hallway, his family, both by blood and by choice, waited in the dark, all watching to see which version of Toya Todoroki, or DABI Torino, would emerge from that room. The night stretched on. Then, as the integration reached a critical stability point, the transformation paused, allowing the body to settle into its new reality. UA High School. Medical ward late night. DABI's eyes snapped open as awareness returned all at once. One moment there was darkness, and the next the world crashed in with blinding light, harsh sound, and every nerve screaming awake. His vision was different, and then there was the sense. It was a buzzing, prickling vibration that warned him of every object in the room, every shadow, and every person standing on the other side of the reinforced glass. His attention drifted toward the hallway outside. Through the wall he could make out the silhouette of a massive man sitting there, the heat rolling off him almost palpable, along with the heavy, uneven rhythm of a heart beating with the same fiery cadence as his own. Who is this flamethrower dude? Just then his vision shifted to the system panel. Genetic milestone system, 3 evolution paths, breath of the sun, 100 out of 100%. Super soldier, 100 out of 100%. Arachnid genome, 20 out of 100%. Lifespan left, 101 plus years. Finally, but 101 years. Isn't that still too little considering I have fully absorbed super soldier? Just how bad was the condition of my body? He knew the mechanics of the super soldier serum. It is basically an enhancer that optimizes the existing biological frame to the absolute human peak. Given how thoroughly he had incinerated his own internal organs over the years, he had expected the serum to barely keep him from collapsing. And despite having counted his years by the bare minimum, he felt that in that moment it was enough. But now, even after fully absorbing the serum, he only got 101 years, which is basically a lot less than what the original captain had received. The malignancy had run so deep, entangled with quirk-damaged cells, that even peak human physiology could only stabilize his body from the wreckage. Arachnid genome, 20 out of 100%. Stuck at 20%, huh? He knew the pattern by now. He would likely need far more time, energy, effort, and perhaps more than he even knew to truly recover. It is always more and more. His sense softened, turning his attention to the immediate vicinity of his bed. But first and foremost, he muttered quietly, "What are these two doing here?" Rumi was slumped in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, her head tilted at an angle that was going to give her a terrible neck ache, and in her lap, curled up like a small cat, was Eri. They looked vulnerable in a way that made DABI's new instincts hum with a protective ferocity. Rumi's usual number 5 hero bravado had worn away under the exhaustion of the night, leaving her looking softer, younger, and completely unguarded. And Eri's small hand was clutching Rumi's shirt, even in sleep, refusing to let go. Despite the stiffness of his muscles, DABI smiled. Outside the window, the moon hung high in the sky, marking the hour as either deep night or the earliest edge of morning, while the UA campus lay silent beneath scattered security lights. For a moment, DABI considered waking them up, but they looked so peaceful, and he knew once they woke up, there would be questions and explanations and probably crying. Instead, he carefully extended one arm and managed to pull a blanket from the foot of the bed over them. It was awkward, and his shoulder screamed in protest, but he got it done. Rumi shifted slightly but didn't wake. Eri made a small sound and burrowed deeper into her lap. DABI settled back against his pillows, watching them, and he waited. The night passed slowly. He cataloged the changes in his body, the way his senses seemed sharper, how his hearing picked up sounds from rooms away, and the strange tingling in his fingertips that might have been his new spider abilities trying to manifest. But mostly, he just watched his family sleep. As the sky outside began to lighten with the approaching dawn, DABI heard footsteps in the hallway. Recovery Girl's distinctive gait, accompanied by someone else. The door opened. "Told you already, if you sleep in this room, I am going to kick you out of this hospital for..." Recovery Girl stopped mid-sentence, her eyes landing on DABI. He was awake, sitting upright, watching her with sharp, fully aware eyes. She simply stared for a few seconds, then her professional mask slipped, and her expression shifted through relief, irritation, and something faintly resembling maternal affection. "You absolute moron," she said, her voice thick. "Do you have any idea how close you came to dying? How many rules of biology did you break just by surviving?" "I ought to." But she was already moving toward him, her medical scanner in hand, checking his vitals. The movement stirred Rumi. Her eyes snapped open, those sharp red eyes shifting from drowsy to fully alert in an instant. The moment she saw DABI awake, her entire expression changed. Her voice cracked. "You're awake." Her eyes went incessantly red, actual tears slipping down her face even as she tried to hold onto an expression that was supposed to look angry. The commotion stirred someone else too. Eri blinked awake, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Then she saw DABI and immediately scrambled out of Rumi's lap. "Papa!" She tried to climb onto the bed, but the recovery girl caught her gently. "Careful, dear. He is still injured." "I am okay, Eri," DABI said, his voice rough from disuse. "Come here." Though he was still wrapped in bandages, he could tell he was completely healed. Recovery girl helped lift her onto the bed, and Eri immediately buried her face in DABI's chest, the one spot that wasn't completely covered in bandages, and started crying. "You were screaming so loud," she sobbed. "And then you were quiet and I thought, shoo, I am okay. I am right here." DABI managed to lift one bandaged arm to pat her head awkwardly. "Takes more than a couple of monsters to finish me off." Rumi was still standing there, tears falling freely now, her tough exterior completely shattered. DABI met her eyes. "Hey, bunny. Miss me?" She stepped forward and gently rested her forehead against his. They stayed like that for a moment, a small family reunited. Then the recovery girl cleared her throat. "I need to examine him properly," she said. "And there are others waiting to see you." "Others?" DABI asked. She replied, "Quite a few people actually." As if on cue, voices rose in the hallway, and then, one by one, they stepped inside. Gran Torino first, looking more relieved than DABI had ever seen him. "I thought you had finally kicked the bucket." "Not before you, old bones," DABI replied, all might in his muscular form, his sunken eyes bright with emotion. "Young DABI, you had us all very worried." "Aegean, sorry about that." Then the Todoroki siblings entered, Fuyumi, Natsuo, and Shoto. The room went very quiet. DABI looked at them. His siblings, whom he hadn't seen in almost over a decade, who had long believed he was dead. The situation explained itself quickly enough. Natsuo spoke first, anger already boiling over. "Why?" he demanded. "If you were alive all this time, you could have at least come to see us once." His voice trembled with barely restrained emotion. It was the same question Endeavor had asked the other day. Fuyumi was crying silently, her hands over her mouth. Shoto stood apart, his expression carefully controlled, but his heterochromatic eyes were fixed on DABI with an intensity that was almost painful. DABI started, then stopped. How did someone even begin to explain something like this? "Toya is long dead," he said finally. "I am DABI now." The words landed like a blow. To everyone in the room, and even those listening from the hallway, it sounded like rejection, as though he were choosing this new name over the family standing in front of him. But to DABI, it was simply the truth. The boy who had burned himself alive trying to earn his father's approval was gone, and not in some poetic or symbolic way, but for real. "Then what about Mom?" Fuyumi asked through her tears. "Does DABI care about what happened to her? About how she is the only person I owe anything to." DABI cut in quietly. "The only debt I can never repay." The room fell silent because that was the truth as well. Everything Rei Todoroki had endured, from the arranged marriage to years of quiet suffering and finally the breaking point that had sent her to the hospital. None of it had ever been her fault. Like her children, she had simply been another casualty of Endeavor's ambition. "I will visit her myself," DABI said, "once I'm back on my feet. But understand this, I am not Toya anymore, and that needs to be clear." Before anyone could respond, the door burst open. Endeavor paused in the doorway, exhaustion written into the lines of his wrinkled costume and the faint, unsteady flicker of his flames, his gaze moving across his children one by one before coming to rest on DABI. "Toya," he said, and his voice was, "Piss off," DABI interrupted. Endeavor blinked once. What? Dabi's eyes didn't move from him. That was me being polite, he said flatly. Let me try again. Piss off. The room's temperature surged abruptly, and this time the heat wasn't coming from Endeavor's flames. It was radiating from DABI. Everyone stepped back instinctively except Rumi, who stayed close, her hand on DABI's shoulder. "DABI," she said quietly, "you need to calm down." He didn't even realize he was doing it. The rage wasn't entirely his. It was Toya's, buried beneath everything he had become. Years of resentment, pain, and that desperate need to be seen clawing its way back to the surface. He forced himself to breathe. Total concentration breathing, the rhythm he had perfected over years. Hold. The temperature dropped. "Sorry," he muttered, not sounding sorry at all. Still adjusting to a few changes. Then he looked at Endeavor again, and whatever softness had briefly crossed his face disappeared completely. "Why don't you go train your youngest project?" DABI said coolly. "That's what you have always been good at, isn't it? Don't waste your time here on a failed project." Endeavor flinched like he had been struck. "And Shoto," DABI added, looking at his youngest brother. "If you get the chance someday, make sure you F him up. You have got the potential." Shoto's eyes widened, just a fraction, and DABI eased back against the bed. "Anyway, that's enough of this little family reunion," he said flatly. "I am tired, so everyone can." "Wrong, wrong, wrong." The interruption cut straight through the tension. Eri had slipped out of Recovery Girl's grasp and climbed onto the bed, planting her tiny feet firmly on the mattress while placing both hands on her hips as she glared up at DABI with all the authority a 4-year-old could muster. "Papa," she scolded, "that is not how you talk to uncles and aunts. Bad manners." The sudden shift in atmosphere was so abrupt it almost felt absurd. Fuyumi blinked in shock. "Papa." Natsuo stared between DABI and Eri as if trying to solve an impossible equation. "Wait, were you married? How old are you now? How old is she?" "4. DABI cut in quickly. "She is 4. He rubbed the back of his neck. "She is adopted, but she is still our daughter." Eri's innocent interruption had defused the situation. The rage that had been building had been deflated in the face of a small child scolding her father about manners. Sensing the moment before it could reignite, All Might stepped forward. "Perhaps we should give them some space and discuss this elsewhere." "There is nothing to discuss," Endeavor said roughly. His eyes were fixed on DABI, the look in them difficult to decipher. Pain tangled with regret, anger threaded through confusion. "I agree," DABI replied. For a long moment neither of them looked away. "Endeavor," All Might tried again, more carefully this time. "This isn't the something you shouldn't be deciding in a spur." But Endeavor had already turned. Without another word he walked past All Might and out of the room, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway until the sound faded completely. The silence that followed felt thick and uncomfortable. Fuyumi's eyes were still red and watery, the traces of tears not yet faded. Natsuo stood there looking caught between lingering anger and something that almost resembled relief. Shoto's expression remained carefully blank, but something in his eyes had changed. "I think," Recovery Girl said firmly, "that my patient needs rest, so everyone out. You can visit again once he has recovered a little more." The first to leave were the Todoroki siblings. Natsuo practically dragged Fuyumi out of the room while Shoto followed quietly behind them. Slowly, and with obvious reluctance, people began to file out of the room. Gran Torino paused at the doorway, glancing back at DABI. "I will see you later, kid," he muttered. "My back is already complaining from standing here too long." "No matter what happens," DABI replied dryly, "I am not giving you a massage."
Tisk, ungrateful brat.
All Might lingered a moment longer. "Young DABI," he said gently, What you did today, protecting those students, that was true heroism. I am proud of you. DABI didn't answer, only gave a small nod. Aizawa was the last one to leave. The students have been asking about you, he said from the doorway. They want to visit once you are up for it. Tell them I will see them when I can walk without looking like a mummy. Aizawa nodded once. Will do. At last the room quiets, leaving only DABI, Rumi, Eri, and Recovery Girl. Recovery Girl was checking his vitals again, her expression thoughtful. The cellular changes in your body are still continuing, she said after a moment. Whatever transformation you are going through hasn't finished yet, which means you will need to remain here under observation. How long? At least a week, she replied. Possibly 2. She lowered the scanner and gave him a stern look. And during that time you will actually rest, no training, and don't even think about using your quirk. Your body needs time to stabilize. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Good. She packed away her equipment and headed for the door. I will check on you again in a few hours. Rumi, make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. Rumi simply nodded. Eri, however, straightened up and gave a tiny salute. Don't worry, Granny. I will make sure Papa doesn't even get out of bed. Recovery Girl smiled faintly at that before stepping out. Now it was just the 3 of them. Eri had curled up against DABI's side, careful of his injuries. Rumi sat on the edge of the bed, one hand resting on his. 1 week later, UA Medical Ward. Recovery Girl stood in her private office with Gran Torino and All Might, a spread of medical charts covering her desk. Documents that contained the impossible progression of DABI's recovery. By every rule of medicine, those injuries should have taken months to mend, Recovery Girl said, tapping a stack of charts spread across her desk. A normal patient would still be fighting to stay out of intensive care, and even with my quirk involved, I would have expected at least 6 weeks of treatment. But, All Might prompted. He is completely healed in 2 days. She pulled out a comparison scan. This scan on the day he was injured. Recovery Girl said, sliding the image across the desk. You can still see the fractures clearly. The bone is damaged everywhere and the surrounding tissues are in terrible shape. The 3 of them stared at the evidence. It isn't the first time, Gran Torino said quietly. Over the past few years, he has come back from injuries that should have ended him. We have all seen it. Recovery Girl folded her arms, clearly uneasy with what she was about to say. Which is why I have been considering a possibility. She hesitated. All for one. All Might's gaunt frame stiffened. You think? The experiments, she interrupted. 3 years in a coma while they rebuilt his body. Villains with access to multiple quirks and biotechnology far beyond. Her voice turned grim. What if this resilience and accelerated healing is simply a side effect of whatever they did to him? Gran Torino's expression darkened. So you are saying this was intentional? That All for One engineered it?
Non.
Recovery Girl said at once.
Impossible.
If he had foreseen anything like this, they never would have let DABI walk away. They would have kept him under lock and key. Examined, controlled, and eventually turned into a weapon. She paused, organizing her thoughts. My guess is that even All for One couldn't have predicted the result. Too many variables came together. DABI's peculiar quirk biology, the regenerative tissue they grafted into him, whatever procedures they performed during those 3 years, and the brutal training he subjected himself to afterward. She shook her head slowly. What we are seeing now is the product of all that colliding in exactly the right way. A 1 in a billion outcome. All Might stared down at the scans spread across the desk. Just what did they do to his body? He murmured. No one had an answer. There is something else, Recovery Girl said, her tone growing more serious. This incident confirms a fear many of us have had for some time. All for One may be active again. All Might's hands tightened into fists. The Nomu, Until the USJ incident, the possibility had remained uncertain. For years they had fragments of evidence, but nothing conclusive enough to confirm that All for One had truly returned. Now that uncertainty is gone. Creatures with multiple quirks, designed purely for combat.
Gran Torino Side Grimly.
That kind of work isn't something just anyone can pull off. It's his signature. All Might's expression hardened. Then we need to prepare. If he is moving again after all these years, the students will become targets. Recovery Girl finished quietly. They have already been attacked once. That alone tells us enough. The room fell into a heavy silence as the three of them considered what that meant. Gran Torino was the first to speak again. Does DABI know? He asked. About your theory regarding his healing? Recovery Girl shook her head immediately. No, and I have no intention of telling him. Her voice left no room for argument. That boy already carries more than enough weight on his shoulders. Let him believe it's a quirk awakening or some strange side effect of his training. He doesn't need to live with the idea that part of All for One's work might still be inside his body. All Might looked as if he might object, but after a moment he simply nodded. For now, he said quietly. That may be the kinder choice. Medical ward patient room. DABI sat cross-legged on his hospital bed, mostly healed. There were new scars, thin white lines across his arms and torso where the worst injuries had been. They had faded quickly, much faster than scars should, but they remained as permanent reminders of the USJ incident. At this point, the medical staff had stopped questioning if miracle recovery had happened so many times with DABI that it was just expected now. Currently, he is engaged in a very serious game of cards with Eri. Go fish, Eri said triumphantly. You are cheating, DABI accused. I am not. Then how do you keep winning? Because Papa is bad at this game. Eri giggled, arranging her cards with her tiny hands. Rumi had gone back to active hero duty 3 days ago, and she couldn't stay by his bedside forever. But she visited every evening, usually bringing takeout because hospital food was an insult to taste buds everywhere. A knock at the door interrupted their game. Come in, DABI called. The door opened to reveal not one visitor, but nearly the entire Class 1A. Midoriya entered first, looking nervous. Behind him came Ida, Uraraka, Ajui, Kirishima, Yaoyorozu, Jairu, Kaminari, Ashido, Siro, and even Bakugo lurking at the back of the group, trying to look like he didn't want to be there. Shoto was notably absent, and they were carrying bags, a lot of them gifts. DABI-sensei, Midoriya started, then noticed Eri and smiled.
Eritrea-chan.
Big bro. Eri's face lit up. She scrambled off the bed and ran over to the students, immediately latching onto Midoriya's leg. We hope we are not interrupting, Ida said, adjusting his glasses. We wanted to visit and express our gratitude for your actions at the USJ. You are all skipping class now? DABI asked, glancing at the group crowding the room. We brought gifts, Ashido announced quickly, clearly determined to redirect the conversation as she lifted the bag in her hands. Everyone pitched in. That seemed to open the floodgates. One by one, the students stepped forward. Uraraka had brought homemade cookies. They are not professional or anything, but I made them myself. Say thank you for protecting us. DABI accepted them with a faint nod. Next came Ajui, who placed a small potted cactus on the bedside table. Cactus, she explained calmly. Very resilient and hard to kill. Ribbit. Reminded me of you. That's actually pretty fitting, DABI admitted, taking the small pot. Yaoyorozu presented an expensive-looking tea set. For rest and recuperation. Proper relaxation is essential for physical recovery. Thank you, Yaoyorozu. Kirishima had brought protein bars. Take this when you are cleared to train again. Recovery is important, But you have got to keep that manly strength up too, Sensei. Kaminari and Shiro had collaborated on a get-well-soon card that was covered in terrible puns and doodles. It was ridiculous, and DABI actually smiled at it. Jairu offered a small card with a list written on it. "It's a playlist," she said with a shrug. "My father prepared it, saying it was supposed to help with calming one's mind. I figured it might make being stuck in bed slightly less miserable." Ishido then reappeared, this time producing several brightly colored face masks. "Self-care supplies," she declared proudly. "Heroes have to take care of themselves too, you know?" Even Bakugo, when his turn came, shoved a bag forward. "It's just some spicy snacks. Don't make a big deal out of it." That earned a small twitch of irritation at the corner of DABI's lips, though he chose to let it pass without comment. Ida presented a card signed by the entire class, including the students who couldn't make it today. "We wanted you to know that your actions were not taken for granted. You embodied the spirit of heroism, and we are all grateful." Midoriya was last. He held out a small, wrapped package. "This is from me personally," he said quietly. "I wanted to thank you for training me and showing what it really means to be a hero." DABI unwrapped it to find a simple bracelet made of woven cord. It was clearly handmade. "Uraraka helped me make it," Midoriya admitted, his face red. "It's not much, but—" DABI interrupted. "Thank you, Midoriya, and all of you." The atmosphere in the room had shifted from formal gratitude to something warmer. The students relaxed, some sitting on chairs, others standing around the room. "So," Kirishima said, looking around, "are you really coming back to teach?" "Once I cleared a few things up, yeah," DABI confirmed. "Though I might be on light duty for a while." Eri, who had been playing with Uraraka's floating quirk, making small objects drift around the room, suddenly looked up. "Papa," she asked innocently, "why didn't Uncle come with them?" The word uncle immediately changed the atmosphere. A faint tension settled over the room. By now, most of Class 1 knew exactly who that uncle was, and they knew enough about DABI's past to understand the weight behind it. If anything, the knowledge had only increased their respect for him. Still, no one said a word. Principal Nizu had been very clear. The matter was not to be discussed. DABI glanced at Eri. "I don't know," he said flatly. "And why do you even want to know?" "Because he is my uncle," Eri replied as if the answer were obvious. DABI looked at her with the expression of someone who had just been expertly betrayed. He knew exactly what she was trying to do. The little gremlin was attempting to force him to be nice to his siblings. That rock-faced guy with zero social skills is probably still stuck trying to figure out what kind of gift you bring to a patient, DABI muttered. That earned a round of laughter from the students. "Sensei," Kaminari said between chuckles, "you are really not in a position to criticize someone else's social skills." "Yeah," Shiro added, nodding. "Pretty sure the only friend you have is Aizawa-sensei," another voice chimed in. "And he barely tolerates you." DABI narrowed his eyes. "Oh," he said slowly, "looks like you have all grown up. Now you have got the courage to make jokes about your teachers." That shut them up, only for about a second. Then the room filled with quiet snickering again. And despite himself, DABI's mouth curved slightly. They stayed for another hour, filling the room with chatter and laughter. The students told him about how classes had continued after the USJ incident. Extra security, counseling sessions, and Aizawa being even more paranoid than usual. Eventually, visiting hours began to wind down. The students gathered their things, preparing to leave. "Thank you all for coming," DABI said sincerely. "And for the gifts. You didn't have to, but I appreciate it." "We wanted to," Uraraka said cheerfully. "Get better soon, Sensei," Kirishima added. "We need you back at full power." "I will do my best." Eri climbed back onto the bed. "Papa, can we finish our game now?" "Yeah. Let's finish the game." As they returned to their cards, DABI felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: contentment. He had a family now, students who looked up to him, and a purpose that reached beyond the simple act of surviving another day. And when the next phase of whatever transformation his body was still undergoing finally finished, when it settled into whatever new shape it was becoming, he would be ready. For now, though, he allowed himself something simpler. More like he cannot allow himself to give his attention to anything other than the cards spread across the bed. But it mattered. Go fish, Papa. You are definitely cheating. I am not. UA High School Indoor Training Ground Gamma. Indoor Training Ground Gamma, an artificially constructed ruin of a city that UA used for urban combat exercises. Class 1A stood in a loose cluster near the entrance, gym uniforms on, and none of them were talking, which was unusual for this group. Any other day, Kaminari would have been cracking jokes, Mina bouncing off someone's shoulder, Kirishima loud about something. But not today. Aizawa also wasn't here. Paperwork, mountains of it, left behind by the villain attack at USJ, had buried him in administrative hell. And for once, the man who could erase quirks with a glance had been erased by bureaucracy. That left DABI, who stepped in front of them and rolled his neck, the sound dry and sharp, like a twig snapping underfoot. "The sports festival's coming up," he said, skipping past any kind of greeting or warm-up. "Every major hero agency in the country is going to be watching. Pros from all over Japan will have eyes on this event. This is your shot to make a first impression that actually counts for something." A few students nodded along, believing it to be standard pre-festival talk. He paused. "That's not why we're here today, though." His eyes moved across the group, slowly student by student, taking his time, like he was reading something written on each of their faces that they themselves couldn't see. "After USJ, I had some time to think about how that whole thing went down. What I saw from you. A beat. What I didn't see. Another beat, longer this time. And I came to a conclusion about every single one of you." The air tightened. The lack of real combat experience is obvious. Anyone can see it. He let that sit for a moment. Then, "But more importantly, you are all weak." The word landed like a slap across the face of every student standing there. But the most visible reaction came from Bakugo, whose entire body went rigid. His pride was a living thing, and it had just been stabbed in public. "Your quirks are fine," DABI continued, unbothered. "Some of you have real talent and genuine potential. But talent sitting on top of a weak body is just..." He seemed to search for the right comparison. House of cards. Doesn't matter how sharp your blade is if the arm holding it can barely swing. The color drained from Midoriya's face. He recognized those words. The same phrasing DABI had hammered into him across 8 months of private training to prepare his body for One for All. Back then, those words had been the opening line of the worst physical experience of his life. Hearing them again now, aimed at an entire classroom, sent a cold wire of dread straight through his stomach. That was when the whole of Class 1 had dropped their eyes to the rows of dark metal objects arranged at their feet. Custom-fabricated training weights, ankle cuffs, wristbands, bicep wraps that are strapped above the elbow near the shoulder, and broad waist belts with compression locks. Every single piece is engraved with a student's name. "Starting today," DABI said, "we begin dedicated physical conditioning. I will be overseeing it personally." The faintest flicker of amusement. "I hope none of you are planning to drop out." Kirishima lunged forward before anyone else could react. "Hell yeah, this is what I am talking about." He dropped into a crouch and grabbed one of the ankle cuffs, lifting it one-handed like he was testing a dumbbell at a sports store. His grin started wide and confident, the trademark Kirishima grin, all teeth and enthusiasm. Then his arm dipped and the grin wobbled. "Wait, hold on, this is actually heavy. Ours looks smaller than some of the others." Hagakure's voice came from somewhere near the back of the group. But, can I really call these small? Honestly, she couldn't. Each student's kit had 5 pieces, 2 ankle weights, 2 arm pieces, 1 at the wrist, 1 strapped above the elbow near the shoulder, and 1 waist belt. The sizes varied from student to student, calibrated to individual physical baselines that DABI had apparently been tracking without any of them noticing. But even the lightest set in the row was enough to make the person wearing it reconsider their life choices. Each set matches your physical capacity, DABI said, hands pocketed. Starting today, they go wherever you go. This time, Kaminari stopped forward, mostly trying to impress the girls. He crouched in front of his waist belt, the largest piece, gripped both ends, and pulled with all his strength, bracing his legs as the veins stood out along his forearms. But it still didn't budge. "Sir," he wheezed, straightening up with a lopsided grin. "I am gonna need a second me just to lift this thing." Since showing off hadn't worked, he tried humor instead, and a few students even laughed nervously. But the sound faded the moment they looked at DABI. That blank, unreadable mask, somewhere between boredom and a threat. "Pick up." Kaminari's grin cracked at the edges. Ha ha. "You're joking, right, Sensei?" "Yeah. You've got to be joking. There's no way this is." "Shut up and put it on." Just 4 words, and the training ground went dead silent. "On it, sir." Midoriya moved immediately. To him, hesitation wasn't an option. He dropped to one knee and started with the ankle cuffs. The straps tightened, 20 kilograms per leg. Pain shot through his calf the moment the first one locked, but he clenched his teeth and kept going. Wrist weights, shoulder wraps, and finally a waist belt, 90 kilograms total. The weight dragged him toward the floor like gravity had doubled. He tried to stand. Ooh-ah. His legs buckled, knees shaking, and the muscles screaming under the load. For a second, he almost collapsed. Then his body remembered. The breathing technique. Midoriya forced himself upright, trembling, soaked in sweat, but standing. Bakugo watched the whole thing with narrowed eyes. His lip curled, but not in mockery. "If that Deku can stand, then I will stand without making a goddamn sound." He strapped his weights in silence, and when the full 90 kilos hit his frame, his body dropped 3 inches before raw explosive force caught him at the knees. Todoroki went next, then Kirishima, who let out a guttural, "Come on," through gritted teeth as the waist belt nearly folded him in half. Then Mina, who gasped and grabbed Kirishima's arm for balance. Ida, whose legs, those engine-powered legs that could outrun most vehicles, buckled under 44 kilos of ankle weight alone before the rest even went on. Momo, Shoji, Sato, Uraraka, who looked like she might cry but didn't. Then it was Jiro, Toru, and Tokoyami. It took some time. Most of them couldn't strap on the waist belts alone and needed help. Shoji, the only one still partially functional, assisted 3 classmates before his own weight load finally brought him to one knee. Kaminari needed Kirishima and Siro working together to haul him upright. But in the end, every single student had done it. "Good," DABI said, watching the last of them lock their weights into place. "Can I lift it? Can I do it?" He mimicked the thoughts he knew were running through their heads. Throw away those pathetic doubts. Arg! Half the class could barely straighten their legs. DABI didn't wait for them to stabilize. Think of it this way, only death waits for those who fail. So if that's what's on the other side of giving up, his eyes swept across 20 trembling students. Then tell me, what in this world is impossible? The class had nothing to offer except the sound of their own ragged breathing. Now 100 squats. Full depth. Go. 100. Kaminari's voice hit a pitch dogs would complain about. Jiro would have roasted him for it if her lungs still worked. Did I stutter? It was, without question or exaggeration, the longest 10 minutes of their lives. Every squat was a war. The downward motion wasn't the problem. Gravity was happy to help with that part. It was the standing back up that broke them. Legs shaking, faces purple. Some of them openly groaning or biting back screams with every rep. Urarka's eyes watered from rep 15 onward, but she never stopped moving. Bakugo's count outpaced everyone else's by a margin that would have been impressive if he didn't look like he was about to burst a blood vessel in his forehead. Midoriya found a rhythm somewhere around rep 40. With the dead-eyed focus of a veteran returning to a war zone he had already survived once. By the time the last student hit 100, the class looked like survivors of a natural disaster. Bodies scattered across the training ground in various states of collapse, gasping and wheezing, some flat on their backs staring at the sky with the hollow eyes of people who had glimpsed the void and lived. A few seconds of blessed silence. Okay, Kirishima panted, managing half a grin while lying flat on his back. We did it. That was insane, but we managed. Guys, Midoriya cut through the relief. He was still on his feet, and the expression on his face hadn't changed since the weights went on. If anything, it had gotten worse. This isn't over yet. Kirishima pushed himself up on one elbow. Hey, come on, man. We're not done yet, right? I get it. Keep the momentum going. Push through.
No.
Midoriya shook his head. I mean, literally. This isn't. Yeah. We're not done yet. Love the motivation, Midori. Warm-up's over. DABI cut in. Main exercise starts now.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going. Plus, it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.